Chapter 173. Seeing what Lin Xiao wrote, Junjun looked at it blankly at first, as if she couldn't understand it for a while. After a few seconds, she suddenly widened her grayish-white eyes. She looked up at her. What did this mean? She could change her body and face? She could change her face, but how could she change her body? Lin Xiao erased the words in front and continued to write. The original owner of this body was called Lu Tianyu. She was originally the mistress of a leader in Sea City base, but someone got tired of her, so she was thrown into the zombies. After writing, she held up the board for Junjun to see. Junjun looked as if he didn't understand at all. Lin Xiao took back the board, erased it, and continued to write. When I woke up, I became what you saw before. Junjun. Her brain was a bit stuck. Did this mean that Lin Xiao was actually borrowing another person's body? No wonder her relatives looked at her like she was a stranger. She thought that the Lin family would recognize her when her face was restored. Unexpectedly, it was another person's face. She suddenly felt that Lin Xiao was a little pitiful. In front of her relatives, she had to get along like a stranger. Lin Xiao knew what she was thinking and smiled carelessly. She wrote, "It doesn't matter, as long as I can stay by their side. I'll be satisfied." At this moment, a voice called out to her from the space and entered her mind. Lin Xiao remembered that she still had a corpse in her space. She wrote on the board, "By the way, I'll introduce you to a friend." As she said that, under Junjun's curious gaze, in a flash, he entered the space and appeared beside Xiedong. Xiedong could already move freely at this time. After Lin Xiao went out, he sat down on the chair and suddenly found that the space was much larger than before. In addition to the size of the lake, the grassland had not changed either. However, a strange forest had appeared. He looked at the small stove not far away and saw that there was a pot on it. He stood up curiously and began to slowly wander around in Lin Xiao's space. He didn't see the daughter of the leader of Sea City base, but there were still a lot of things in the space. The small dimension that he had inadvertently obtained from the spatial ability user in his previous team had appeared in a location that was very far away from where he was. On the grass, other than the lush strawberries, there were also some green vegetables. There's even a pile of big, mutated pumpkins next to it? Mutated potato? Why did she bring these things in? Do you eat it? Imagining Lin Xiao nibbling on pumpkins and potatoes, Xiedong felt terrible. Apart from the food, they also found a lot of exquisite and luxurious furniture. Where did this come from? The old bed from before was gone. After walking around, Xiedong had a weird expression on his face. In the end, he couldn't help but raise his head and shout at the gray, misty sky. Roar! Lin Xiao? Not even 10 seconds had passed. Lin Xiao flashed in. Xiedong was dumbfounded when he saw Lin Xiao's bald head. If Xiedong had not recognized the familiar pair of black eyes and Lin Xiao's aura, he would have jumped back. He raised his hand and pointed at Lin Xiao's head. Pfft! Could he laugh? Lin Xiao rolled her eyes at him and said, "If you want to laugh, then laugh." Xiedong, who had been holding back his laughter, heard her words. He laughed. Although he didn't make a sound when he laughed, his expression was too obvious. Lin Xiao grabbed him and flashed out. 2 people appeared in the room. As soon as they came out, Xiedong reflexively looked at Junjun and Tong Tong. When he saw that it was a female zombie who hadn't even reached level 2 and a child, he breathed a sigh of relief. Although Junjun had been prepared, when she suddenly saw a man, she was shocked. Startled, she subconsciously hugged Junjun in her arms. It seemed that only by hugging Tong Tong like this would she feel safe. But when she sensed again, she realized the other party wasn't human, but something like them. But that face, what was going on? She saw Xiedong's clear black and white eyes, which were no different from those of a human. His face was clean, and there were no dark circles under his eyes. He looked just like a normal person, and she couldn't see any characteristics of a zombie at all. But judging from his aura, he was indeed a zombie, and a zombie of a higher level than her. Lin Xiao raised her hand and gestured to Junjun, then said to Xiedong, "Jun, Jun." Then she gestured to Tong Tong. Tong, Tong. Tong Tong saw a stranger, so she was a little timid and leaned towards Junjun. Hugging her neck, she looked at Xiedong curiously. Lin Xiao then turned to Xiedong and said to Junjun, Xia Dong. Xia Dong listened to Lin Xiao's voice, although it was hoarse and hoarse. His pronunciation was still clear, and he could hear everything clearly. But the speed of his speech was too slow, as if he was stuttering. But it was better than not being able to speak. But why could Lin Xiao speak? And what about the scar on his face? What was with this bald head? Well, maybe it was because the previous head had been blown up by a straw, so shaving it would make sense. He turned his head and looked at Junjun and Tong Tong. The female zombie's level wasn't as high as his, so she wasn't dangerous. But she was hugging a human child, which was a little weird. But now he didn't care why Junjun kept hugging the child. What he cared about was the change in Lin Xiao. Woo! Ow! How can you speak? Xia Dong opened his mouth and asked Lin Xiao. Hearing this question, Junjun also looked up at Lin Xiao. Although she vaguely knew that Lin Xiao's recovery had something to do with the lake, she didn't know the process. She was also very curious about how Lin Xiao recovered and could speak. Lin Xiao thought for a moment, then wrote on the writing board, "My condition improved in the lake, and my body recovered with the energy in the lake." Xia Dong looked at her expectantly. His eyes were filled with desire. Lin Xiao knew that he also wanted to speak. But she had never tried to heal other zombies except for herself. Moreover, he had to first discuss with the strange vine before he could let the other zombies go down. Otherwise, the situation with the level 4 wind-type female zombie might happen. She didn't want her energy core to be sucked dry before her voice recovered. Then the loss outweighed the gain. She looked down and wrote on the writing board, "There is a creature in my lake, and you guys want to recover. You have to get its permission, otherwise." Lin Xiao deliberately looked at Junjun. Junjun had been staying in her space. She spent more time than outside, so of course she knew about the existence of the vine. Sure enough, Junjun's expression shrank. She looked at Lin Xiao with a little fear and helplessness. Xia Dong didn't pay attention to what was at the bottom of the lake. After he became a zombie, he lost his mind and jumped into the lake. In fact, he was thrown to the surface by the vine, and it also absorbed his energy. Chapter 174. But there was nothing in Xia Dong's body except the energy of the zombie virus. So, after the virus was sucked out of him, he was immersed in the energy of the lake. He woke up after he got out of the lake. If the vines hadn't sucked out his virus and changed his physique by the energy of the water, of course, he wouldn't have become what he is now. He would have been a zombie, except for the vines that would throw a tantrum. No one knew. Lin Xiao didn't know. Xia Dong didn't know either. When Xia Dong woke up, he didn't remember the part where he became a zombie. Junjun opened her mouth to Lin Xiao, but there was no sound. But Lin Xiao had already received what she wanted to say. So she wrote on the writing board, "I have to discuss this with it. But to recover your body or voice, you need energy. The energy core of a human, a zombie, or a mutant animal or plant would also work." And Lin Xiao wasn't sure, except for herself. Could the voices of other zombies be cured? Thinking of this, she wrote, "I need to ask if your voices can be cured." Then she turned around and went back into the space. On the other side, after Lin Xiao left, Lin Feng and the others began to discuss the words she had written. Mrs. Lin said thoughtfully, "When I saw what she wrote on the paper yesterday, I thought her handwriting was familiar. Now that I think about it, it's exactly the same as Qiao's." Lin Wenwen nodded and said, "An ordinary person wouldn't be able to write such a sharp and imposing manner with my sister's handwriting. Even if it's an imitation, the momentum of the words will be different. But I was watching her just now. She wrote very casually. Her handwriting is exactly the same as my sister's." Lin Feng's expression was deep in thought. After thinking for a while, he said, "Her aura and the way she sat just now, even her habits of sitting are very similar. And I noticed that I was staring at her face and ignored her appearance. Then I realized that her expression is also very familiar. Anyway, from her behavior to her expression, it's very similar. Even the tone of her speech and the way she thinks are very similar. What do you think?" Tianqing. He turned to look at Yuan Tianqing, who had an indifferent expression on his face. Although Yuan Tianqing still had a faint smile on his face, his eyes were flickering as he pondered about something. He had taken note of what Lin Feng and the others had said. As a sweetheart who had been secretly in love with her for many years, Of course, he knew her every move. Moreover, he had been by Lin Xiao's side all these years. But this Lu Tianyu situation was too strange. He couldn't figure out what was going on. As a zombie, it came all the way to save Lin Feng and the others. If she had any ulterior motives, what ulterior motives could zombies have? Eat meat? Eat hearts? Or eat energy cores? But if that was the case, why did he pretend to be a good person in front of them to save them? Furthermore, he clearly looked like a man yesterday. It was just one night. Not only did he suddenly change his appearance, but he also changed his gender. I don't understand. After Lin Xiao went in, there were only 2 zombies and a child left. Junjun stared at Xie Dong with a tense expression. She could sense an ominous aura emanating from Xie Dong. How should he put it? It was a bit like a bloodthirsty aura, but also like a baleful aura. But it didn't seem like the kind of baleful aura that had killed a lot of people. It was more like, Junjun couldn't say it herself, but the feeling that Xie Dong gave her was very dangerous. It wasn't like the pressure of a superior that Lin Xiao and Qiu Lily gave her, but another feeling of a predator. Xie Dong also knew that Junjun was very nervous about his existence. He had tried his best to restrain his aura and aura. If she was still so afraid, then he couldn't help it. He looked left and right and sniffed the air. Then he walked to the door and sniffed the crack of the closed door. There was the smell of living people outside. There seemed to be more than a dozen people. Xie Dong was a little curious about who these people were. Why were Lin Xiao and the female zombie in front of him with these people? Were those the people Lin Xiao was going to the south to find? Did they know that this house was full of zombies? And where did Lin Xiao pick up this female zombie and this child? After leaving Lin Xiao, he now saw that Lin Xiao was no longer alone like when he first saw him. There was another zombie beside him, and there was also a child. Where did the little princess of the Purple Thunder Leader go? Did Lin Xiao send her back? Could it be that Lin Xiao didn't go to the south and sent the little princess back? Or did the leader catch up? But it couldn't be those living people outside. If they weren't the people she was looking for, then who were they? Xie Dong had a lot of doubts in his mind. He looked back at Junjun and Tong Tong with a puzzled face. Why was Lin Xiao always so fated with children? After Lin Xiao entered the space, she looked at the changes in the space and felt a little uncomfortable. Although it had become a lot bigger, she had a feeling that she couldn't control this space. She suddenly wondered whether she was the owner of this space or just an outsider who borrowed it. Or was she the real owner of this space? In fact, was it the thing in the water? Thinking of this, she walked to the lake. She looked at the lake for a while, but in fact, she was feeling the vines in the lake. Would it help to repair the other zombies? As if it sensed Lin Xiao's call, a few familiar vines floated out from the bottom of the lake. Then it came out of the water and stirred the water. Lin Xiao looked at the vines in the center of the lake with some surprise, and immediately raised her hand and waved at the center of the lake. But then, she was in a dilemma. She didn't know how to communicate with this vine. She could communicate with people and zombies, but she had never communicated with plants. Although she felt that this strange vine seemed to have a high intelligence, she knew it from the last time it threw the turtle ashore. But what was the origin of this vine? Or could it be that after the end of the world, mutated plants could become spirits? Also, last time she felt that this vine's reaction was like a willful child. It even used the behavior of slapping the water to protest. It was a little funny thinking about it. And when it asked her for the core of the fruit, it also acted like a child, acting like a spoiled child. Seeing Lin Xiao beckoning, the vine really stretched out a long branch and swam toward her. Huh, so obedient. Looking at the branch that actually stretched out toward her, Lin Xiao was surprised to see it approaching. But how could she express to it that she wanted it to repair the other zombies? Although it was repair, she felt that it was more appropriate to say that it was an upgrade. Because every time she repaired, her strength would increase. Could she write? Was she sure that this vine could understand? Could it speak? Well, she didn't know if it could understand, but it seemed that it could use telepathy to communicate. She suddenly remembered that the previous 2 times this vine used its tail to wrap around her hand or leg, it would send a message in her mind that it needed energy. It seemed that it also needed direct contact to communicate. Chapter 175. Lin Xiao tried to stretch out a finger, and sure enough, she saw the vine slowly stretch out from the shore of the lake, and then along the ground all the way to her. She squatted down and handed her finger down. The vine seemed to know what she meant and immediately circled over. Mama, Lin Xiao. Huh? Who? Mama, damn it. Who asked her to be Mama? You strange vine. Don't call people randomly. Okay. Lin Xiao stared at the vine wrapped around her finger in horror and was frightened by the sudden sound of Mama in her mind. Woo woo woo, you are Mama. You are Mama. As soon as Lin Xiao finished thinking, another wrong thought came to her mind, and it always thought that she was its Mama. Lin Xiao was about to cry. Even if she suddenly transmigrated to 5 years later and became a zombie, she still couldn't give birth to a baby vine. Not give birth, it was planted. Sensing Lin Xiao's thoughts, the vine sent another thought to him. It protested its origin. Lin Xiao didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and then thought helplessly, who is so powerful to be able to plant you in this space? Anyway, I didn't plant you. Woo woo woo, Mama, you are Mama. The vine's thought carried a kind of coquettish dissatisfaction. It seemed to be afraid that Lin Xiao wouldn't recognize it, so it began to brush the screen in her mind. Mama, you are my Mama. You are my Mama. Mama, 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 Mama. Lin Xiao, who was tortured to the point of wanting to cry, was speechless. Mama, Mama, Mama. The vine kept sending her the word like a monster, and Lin Xiao soon couldn't resist it anymore. She finally gave up, closed her eyes, and used her other hand to block in the direction of the vine. Okay. Got it. I am your Mama. Stop messing around. Quiet. So, she couldn't do anything to children. Sure enough, this vine's IQ was also at the stage of a child, the kind that liked to be willful. However, Lin Xiao wanted to discuss something else with it, so she decided to put aside the matter of why it thought she was its mother. She would come in and ask it when she was free. Fortunately, the vine was very obedient. When Lin Xiao told it to be quiet, it immediately quietened down. However, it was still poking Lin Xiao's palm with its thin tail, as if it was playing. Looking at this leafless branch, Lin Xiao thought about how to make it repair other zombies. At the same time, he asked for its name. Since it was something with intelligence, it should have a name. Do you have a name? Sensing Lin Xiao's question, the vines paused for 2 seconds before continuing to poke her. Mama can just call me Little Man Man. Little Man Man? Vines. So this guy really did have a name, although it seemed to be a nickname. Of course he has a name. Feeling Lin Xiao's surprise, Little Man Man sent her an unhappy emotion. Lin Xiao could not help but poke the branch with the other finger that was not entangled. He found that it felt a little soft. It didn't feel slippery because he had been in the water for a long time. It was soft, and bouncy. It was different from the way it had wrapped around her in the lake. It was time to get down to business. Lin Xiao poked it and asked in his heart, "Can you help me turn the other zombies into what I am now? Restore my appearance and can talk?" Hearing Lin Xiao's request, Little Man Man quickly replied, Sure, as long as Mommy wants me to do it, Little Man Man can help, but Little Man Man doesn't have enough energy, so Mommy needs to find an energy source for Little Man Man." Hearing Young Man agree to his request so readily, Lin Xiao was delighted. He didn't expect it to be willing to help. She also knew that the energy source Little Man was talking about was referring to the cores of corpses, humans, animals, and plants. She nodded and replied, Sure, I'll provide the zombie cores or other energy cores. Lin Xiao didn't quite understand what kind of people it was talking about, so he asked, Your kind? Was it the energy core of a plant? Or is it just a vine like you? Little Man replied, What is a plant? As soon as it mentioned leveling up, Lin Xiao thought of the energy core from the vine. It was just a vine energy core of unknown grade, but it had actually made this space so big. However, this Little Man said that it had leveled up. Where was it? Sensing Lin Xiao's doubts, Little Man shook her branches a little proudly. I've grown up. Little Man's energy core is getting bigger now. Lin Xiao looked at it strangely. Alright, it was normal for this guy to have an energy core, but it didn't look like it had leveled up at all. Little Man sent another message. When Little Man grows up, it will change its appearance, and it can also move. Lin Xiao looked at it strangely. It could actually move. Thinking that it could move, little Man happily shook its branches. It became better. Lin Xiao nodded. Ready to go out. All right, be a good girl and go back to the lake. I still have something to do. Wait until I help you level up to the point where you can move. I'll take you out to play. Thinking of this, she stood up. As soon as she moved, the branches that were wrapped around her loosened and slid down. They shrank back a little, paused for a while, and then shrank back into the water. It seemed to be reluctant to leave. Lin Xiao stood up, turned around, and suddenly saw the few big water turtles still lying on the other side of the lawn. All right, she still had to deal with her food. She couldn't put them in the water, but she also couldn't let them run around in her space. Then should she get a big iron cage for them? Thinking of the big iron cage, Lin Xiao suddenly thought of Long Qingying. Long Qingying was a metal type. She didn't know if she could get her an iron cage. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao turned around and flashed out of the space. As soon as she got out of the space, she saw the two zombies sitting quietly in their seats. Junjun carried Tong Tong and sat on the head of the bed inside. Xiedong sat on the single sofa in the room. Near the window, he didn't look at Junjun, but turned his face outside the window. Junjun, on the other hand, kept staring at him. Tong Tong, who was in her arms, had fallen asleep. As soon as Lin Xiao appeared, the two turned to look at her at the same time. Xiedong's expression was full of expectation, and Junjun had a feeling of relief. Only then did her tight vigilance relax. Lin Xiao turned her head to look at the two's reaction, and saw that Junjun seemed to reject Xiedong. She turned her head to look at Xiedong. Xiedong's body was still the same, full of injuries. His clothes were dirty and torn, and he looked very embarrassed. But the expression on his face and aura were no longer the feeling he had when he first became a zombie. She didn't carefully sense Xiedong before, but now that she observed, then he realized that something was wrong. Lin Xiao looked at Xiedong expressionlessly and said, "You eat people?" Chapter 176. Although Lin Xiao said these three words slowly, the other two already understood the meaning of Lin Xiao's words. She asked Xiedong how many people he had eaten. Hearing Lin Xiao's words, Junjun subconsciously turned Tong Tong in another direction and used her body to block Xiedong's direction. Xiedong heard Lin Xiao's question and a dark light flashed in his eyes. But he didn't reply to Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao sniffed him and glanced at him indifferently. "Eat? You don't get addicted." She didn't object to Xiedong eating people. It was fine if he ate evil people, but he couldn't get addicted. If he got addicted, Xiedong nodded to her. Lin Xiao continued, "Look, right. Like, eating people depended on the target. If it was an enemy or evil people like the bandits, he could eat them. But she didn't want Xiedong to get addicted to eating people and slowly lose his human nature. He would become a cold-blooded and heartless zombie with human memories." Xiedong roared at her. "Don't worry, I won't eat people randomly. I understand." He meant to tell Lin Xiao that he wouldn't eat people randomly unless he had no other choice. He could still tell how serious the consequences of eating human flesh were. Lin Xiao nodded and did not continue on this topic. Instead, he glanced at Junjun. She looked at Junjun and said, "You follow me." Xiedong knew that Lin Xiao wanted him to follow her and not let him get close to the female zombie who was holding the child. She was afraid that he wouldn't be able to resist the temptation and would attack the little boy. But without Lin Xiao's protection, could this female zombie protect the child? Xiedong looked at Junjun and then at Lin Xiao in confusion. Lin Xiao sensed his thoughts and suddenly pointed to a direction outside the window. Puzzled, Xiedong turned his head to look in the direction she was pointing at. He saw a white figure standing quietly on the roof of another building in the distance. From afar, he could see a pair of red eyes looking in their direction. Seeing that pair of eyes, Xiedong subconsciously had goosebumps. It was a feeling of being scared. The white figure wasn't far from them, about 200 meters away. However, he hadn't sensed it at all before. He hadn't even known of its existence. Only now did he suddenly realize that the other party had been watching his movements. Moreover, when he saw this white shadow, he felt an inexplicable sense of oppression in his heart. Before Xiedong could figure out the identity of the white shadow, The white shadow suddenly disappeared in a flash. He turned his head to look at Lin Xiao, asking her with his eyes. However, Lin Xiao did not tell him Qiu Lily's identity. Instead, he turned around and walked to the door, indicating that she was going out now. Xiaodong saw that she didn't say anything, so he turned around and looked in the direction where the white shadow disappeared. Then, he followed Lin Xiao to the door. Coincidentally, Lin Xiao opened the door and the two of them walked out. Lin Xiao led Xiaodong to Lin Feng's room. She asked for Long Qingying's location. He walked to the other door and knocked on it. Wei Jingxian, who was standing in front of Yuan Tianqing's room, turned his head to look at Lin Xiao. Another stranger had appeared beside her. Xiaodong looked like a human, so Wei Jingxian thought it was just a human following Lin Xiao. He only glanced at Xiaodong casually before looking away. After hearing someone knock on the door to Long Qingying's room opened. It was Lin Wanwan who opened the door. When she saw Lin Xiao, she asked curiously, Lu Tianyu? It's you. What's the matter? She didn't notice that when she called Lin Xiao Lu Tianyu, Xiaodong, who was behind Lin Xiao, was stunned. Then, he looked at the back of Lin Xiao's bald head as if he had seen a ghost. Lin Xiao was close to him, so she quickly felt his emotional reaction. However, she didn't turn around. Instead, she said to Lin Wanwan as if nothing had happened, "Find Long." She was using Lu Tianyu's body, so it was normal for Xiaodong to have a reaction when he heard Lu Tianyu's name. After all, these two people were originally from Sea City Base. Although Lu Tianyu might not know Xiaodong, everyone in Sea City Base knew Lu Tianyu's reputation. Moreover, there were many people who knew her. However, her current appearance, with her black eyes and bald head, was too different from the original Lu Tianyu. It was normal for Xiaodong not to recognize her. Now that he suddenly heard someone call her Lu Tianyu, he was definitely surprised, and then there were all kinds of doubts and puzzlement. Lin Wenwen suddenly heard Lin Xiao reply with 2 words, although her voice was a little unpleasant. It was only 2 words, but she could still understand what it meant. However, Lin Wanwan still looked at Lin Xiao in surprise. This was the first time she had heard a zombie speak. So fresh. She looked at Lin Xiao curiously while turning around and shouting, "Qing Qing, Lu Tianyu is looking for you." Then, as she opened the door, she glanced at Xiaodong. She then asked Lin Xiao, "You can actually speak. Don't you zombies have broken throats? And isn't your tongue also stiff? I heard that when zombies eat meat, they use their teeth to bite into the mouth and then directly swallow it. They don't even need to use their tongues." After Lin Wanwan opened the door, Lin Xiao walked in. Xiaodong didn't follow her in. He just stood at the door and watched Lin Xiao go in with a bad expression. A girl's room couldn't be entered randomly. He still knew this basic courtesy. But just now, this girl called Lin Xiao Lu Tianyu, which made Xiaodong enter a state of confusion. Wasn't she called Lin Xiao? How did it become Lu Tianyu? Did she have the same name as the Lu Tianyu in the base? Or was it the same person? But it was impossible. It didn't look like it at all. It was that woman who wore heavy makeup all day long and cared a lot about her clothes and hair. How could she become like this now? Bald? The style of clothes she wore had also changed greatly, and she had become a zombie. But when he combined Lin Xiao's face with the original Lu Tianyu's face, he suddenly found that it did seem a little similar. The facial features were almost the same, but the difference between the two faces was too big. He couldn't be sure. But if she was Lu Tianyu, why did she tell him her name was Lin Xiao in the beginning? Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao. This name was a little familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere. And if she was Lu Tianyu, how did she become a zombie? Then how did she die before she became a zombie? And would that leader Yang be willing to let her die? Yang Chao had been indulging Lu Tianyu to do whatever she wanted in the base and spoiled her to the point of no return. How could he let her die? But when he thought of the first time he saw Lin Xiao, it was even worse than now. Her face was full of scars from being bitten by zombies, and maybe her body was the same. It was just that he didn't see it because of her clothes. And why did her personality suddenly change after she became a zombie? And she knew so many combat skills of the special forces. Lu Tianyu wasn't a soldier before. Chapter 177. Thinking about it, all kinds of questions were spinning in his head. Xiaodong was already a little stunned. He stood beside the door in a daze. While waiting for Lin Xiao to come out, he was thinking. Lin Wenwen glanced at Xie Dong curiously. After seeing Lin Xiao come in, she closed the door. Lin Xiao just faintly replied to Lin Wenwen's curious question with a mysterious smile. Then Lin Xiao looked at Long Qingying, who was walking over from the window, took out a writing board and wrote a sentence. I want you to help me make a big iron cage. Iron cage? What do you want to do with an iron cage? What do you want to lock in? Seeing Lin Xiao's words, Lin Wenwen's eyes flashed. He stared at her words for 2 seconds. Then he asked. Long Qingying also looked at Lin Xiao in confusion. She asked, Big iron cage? What kind of cage do you want? How big? Lin Xiao casually wrote, rectangular, 2 meters high, 5 meters long, 3 meters wide. The bottom was blank. Long Qingying and Lin Wenwen looked at it and asked curiously, so big? What is it locked in? Lin Wenwen also asked, you don't need to make the bottom, like an iron cage cover? Lin Xiao erased the words and wrote, Big turtle. Then the expressions of the two people became even more confused. What kind of turtle would need such a big iron cage? How big was that turtle? And why did zombies catch turtles and lock them up? Lin Xiao didn't give an answer to the two people's doubts. She just wrote, Can you help? Long Qingying nodded at her and replied expressionlessly, No problem, but you're asking for too much. I'll go downstairs and get it for you. Lin Xiao nodded and smiled at the two people. Long Qingying walked to the door without hesitation. She did as she said. Lin Xiao followed behind, and Lin Wenwen also followed her out curiously. As soon as Long Qingying came out, she saw Xie Dong standing by the wall. She glanced at him uninterestedly and walked in the direction of the stairs. After coming out of the hall, Long Qingying walked to the parking lot outside the hotel. Xie Dong followed Lin Xiao down the stairs. Ever since Lin Xiao came out of Lin Wenwen's room, he had been staring at Lin Xiao. The more he looked, the more he looked. Could it really be Lu Tianyu? Sensing Xie Dong's gaze, Lin Xiao turned around and glanced at him. Is there a problem? Xie Dong raised his finger and pointed at her, then opened his mouth. He wanted to use his voice to ask if she was Lu Tianyu's, but he glanced at Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying. He gave up again. On the other side, Long Qingying looked at the surrounding buildings and chose a place that had been destroyed the most. He raised a hand and stretched it out. Lin Xiao could see a surge of energy surging out from her head, swirling around her body before gathering in her hands. Long Qingying opened her palm and made a grabbing motion in the air, and all the steel and metal in the half-collapsed building flew towards her. It melted into a lump of black iron on top of the parking lot in front of her. Long Qingying reached out her other hand and grabbed at the iron block with both hands. Then he pulled them apart with both hands. As she moved, the shape of the large iron block seemed to be stretched by an invisible pair of hands. Long Qingying's hands moved in the air like she was drawing, and the iron block changed according to her hand movements, slowly forming a rectangular cage. The top and the 4 walls of the cage were made of steel pillars as thick as broom rods, each about 15 centimeters apart. Long Qingying turned her head and asked Lin Xiao, Is such a wide gap okay? Lin Xiao nodded, indicating that it was okay. Anyway, even if the smallest of those big water turtles turned over, they wouldn't be able to penetrate more than 15 centimeters. Lin Xiao thought that maybe after eating these few turtles, she could go to the lake in the park to catch them again. Seeing her nod, Long Qingying made a huge cage for her. Then, with a clang, she put it on the ground. Lin Xiao walked over, grabbed the steel pillars with her hands, and then broke them with force. She found that they were still very strong, so she turned her head and nodded at Long Qingying. Long Qingying crossed her arms in front of her chest and stood to the side, looking at Lin Xiao curiously. Lin Wenwen looked at it for a while and finally couldn't help but ask, What are you going to lock in? It's such a big one. Lin Xiao closed her eyes and sensed for a while, then waved her hand at the empty space. With a thud, a big turtle shell fell out. Wow, such a big turtle shell. You like to collect turtle shells. What a strange taste. Lin Wenwen looked at the big water turtle curiously. Lin Xiao walked over and turned the turtle over with her feet, letting it lie on the ground. She squatted beside it, and with a shake of her hand, a small mouse suddenly appeared in her hand. She held it by the tail. It had been about 20 days since she woke up in this apocalyptic world. This mouse had also stayed in her space for more than 10 days, and now it wasn't very big. But compared to before, it was indeed a lot bigger. The little mouse was hung upside down by Lin Xiao, and it struggled with all its strength. It bent its body and wanted to climb up along its tail, but with a shake of Lin Xiao's hand, it fell down again. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Lin Xiao shook the little mouse a few times, and the little mouse fainted. She carried the little mouse to the front of the turtle and hung it by its head. The others looked at her actions curiously, not knowing what she was doing. This was just a turtle shell, and Lin Xiao's actions. It seemed like there was something inside. At this moment, the little mouse shook the turtle shell, and suddenly, a turtle's head popped out. It opened its mouth with sharp teeth and tried to bite the little mouse. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Sensing danger, the little mouse immediately screamed and struggled. When the turtle's head was about to bite the little mouse, Lin Xiao raised her hand, and the turtle's teeth bit empty air. Hey, it's alive. Lin Wenwen looked at the big turtle that suddenly stuck out its head and said in astonishment. When the turtle saw that it couldn't bite any food, its 4 legs suddenly stretched out and quickly supported itself on the ground. It turned around and wanted to immediately run away. Lin Xiao lifted her foot and stepped on its shell. The tortoise could only move its limbs on the spot, but it could not crawl forward even an inch. At this moment, the others knew that she was using a cage to keep the turtle, but for this one to need such a big cage, wasn't it a bit? Seeing the others' eyes, Lin Xiao also knew what they were thinking. But she didn't care, and her feet kicked nimbly. She flipped the turtle over and let it lie upside down. She used her feet to push the turtle toward the cage. When she reached the cage, Lin Xiao grabbed the cage's pillar with one hand and then lifted it up with force. He lifted one side of the cage and kicked the tortoise into the cage forcefully. Clah! She put the cage down again. When she kicked the turtle in, it rolled a few times. When it stopped, it was already lying on the ground again. Then it immediately stretched out its legs and began to run. In the end, it ran around in the cage, but it couldn't escape. The pillar of the cage was hit by its hard shell, and although the cage shook a little, it didn't affect it much. Chapter 178. When the others saw the speed at which the tortoise was running in the cage, they all came over with dumbfounded expressions. Fuck, are you really a tortoise? Why are you running faster than a rabbit? Lin Xiao stood outside and put her hand in between the pillars. Then she waved her hand. Dong, dong, dong. With a few sounds, the other tortoises were thrown out by her and thrown into the cage just like that. Then, a group of tortoises bumped into each other in the iron cage. Clang, 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 clang. Duong, duong, duong. A series of chaotic collisions rang out nonstop in the parking lot. The rooms that the people in the rooms upstairs had chosen were all facing this side. Hearing the commotion downstairs, they all looked down at them from the window. What are they doing down there? What a big cage. What's in it? It's so big. It looks a little like a tortoise? Tortoise? A tortoise that runs so fast? Have you seen it before? Yes, it's really a tortoise, but it should be a mutation. But why did Lu Tianyu catch a few tortoises and lock them up? Who knows? It's weird. Long Qingying, who was downstairs, couldn't help but ask, Did you go catch a tortoise last night? You want to eat these tortoises? She knew that Lin Xiao liked to eat mutated animals. Seeing these tortoises, she felt that they might be food that Lin Xiao had caught. Lin Xiao took out her glasses and put them on. She smiled and nodded at her, indicating that she was right. No wonder you don't eat humans. So you eat these. Lin Wenwen suddenly said quietly. Then he said, but these are all mutated tortoises. They should have become like this because of a virus disease. You won't be infected if you eat them because you are a zombie. But if you put this tortoise here, will it run out and bite us? That would depend on whether the cage was strong or not. Lin Xiao looked at Long Qingying. Long Qingying said indifferently, as long as they are not released, they won't be able to run out by themselves. Her cage was also very heavy. Looking at the sharp teeth of these big tortoises biting the iron pillar, but only a few white marks were left. Lin Wenwen glanced at Long Qingying and nodded. At this time, Lin Xiao said to the two of them, "You can eat." Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying looked at each other and then at Lin Xiao. "Do you think we can eat this turtle?" But this was a mutation. There was a virus. If we eat it, we will become like you. However, Lin Xiao shook his head at the two of them and said slowly, "No, I have a method." Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying looked at her confusedly and suddenly asked, "Do you always give the mutant meat to that kid?" Lin Wenwen had thought about this problem before, thinking about how a few zombies could raise a child so well. Lin Luoran and Mrs. Lin were just discussing what the zombies fed the kids. Lin Xiao nodded at her. Lin Wenwen's eyes slightly widened as he said, "Aren't you afraid of turning the child into a zombie?" Lin Xiao shook his hand and said, "I won't." Lin Wenwen looked at Lin Xiao strangely, thinking that it was a miracle that the kid was still alive. But since zombies could tell who could be eaten and who couldn't, it would be a great help. She asked, "How long has the kid been with you?" Lin Xiao stretched out her hand and made a 7 sign. Lin Xiao stretched out her hand and made a 7 sign for her. Lin Wenwen, 7? Or 7 days? Lin Xiao, God. Lin Wenwen nodded. Lin Xiao set up the cage and put the turtle in. Lin Xiao turned around and walked into the hotel lobby. The others followed her. Lin Wenwen was like a curious baby, asking questions. The others followed him in. Lin Wenwen was like a curious baby, asking all sorts of questions. The others also walked in. Lin Wenwen was like a curious baby, asking questions. "You haven't told us how to cook the turtle?" "That's right, other zombies eat humans. Why do you eat animals?" "Oh, other zombies eat people. Why do you eat animals?" Crack, crack, he spoke slowly, so he could only silently listen to the girl's non-stop chatter. She was used to it, so she could only silently listen to the girl talking. She would ask and guess the answer herself. Long Qingying seemed to be used to it. She followed them upstairs with a calm expression. When Lin Xiao arrived at the 4th floor, she said to Lin Wenwen on the roof, "I want to eat my water." Lin Wenwen interrupted her. "Oh, are you saying that if we want to eat the turtle, we have to cook it with your water? Then there won't be any zombie virus? Is it true?" Lin Xiao didn't mind being interrupted and nodded at her. Lin Wenwen, "Oh, I know. Although I don't think what you said is possible, the child is still fine. I'll believe you for now, and you won't harm us, right? Otherwise, why would he save them?" Lin Xiao nodded. They went back to the room. Lin Xiao closed the door and looked back at Xiaodong, asking, "Speak." Whatever he wanted to ask, he could ask. Just now, this guy had been staring at him with a bewildered and puzzled expression, sizing him up from top to bottom, left to right for 18 times. Let him ask all he wants when he comes back. Qiu Lily and Junjun in the room looked at them strangely. Qiu Lily walked to Xiaodong's side, looked left and right, and walked around. After confirming that he was really a zombie, she returned to her favorite chair by the window and sat down. Lin Xiao only said one word, but Xiaodong also received the whole message she said. Xiaodong gestured to her to write. Lin Xiao immediately took out a writing board and a pen and handed them to him, then looked at the places to sit in the room. There were 2 single sofas and a small round chair. The round chair was dragged to the window by Qiu Lily to sit, and Junjun and Tong Tong were on the bed. The remaining 2 sofas were just enough for the 2 of them to sit down. She walked to the sofa and chose one to sit down, pointing to the other one to Xiaodong. Xiaodong followed her over, sat down and wrote, "Are you really Lu Tianyu?" Lin Xiao looked at the writing board he had erected and thought for a moment. She nodded, then shook her head. Xiaodong looked at her blankly. What did this mean? Qiu Lily also looked at her curiously. Junjun was sitting on the edge of the bed, and Tong Tong was lying on the bed beside her, asleep. He was covered with an old quilt. When Xiaodong asked Lin Xiao if she was Lu Tianyu, they also wanted to know what was going on. Qiu Lily and Junjun didn't know that the leader of a base was called Lin Xiao. They might know that the leader of Hades' base was called Hellfire, but they didn't know her real name. So when Lin Xiao told them her name, they didn't care. This time, seeing that Lin Xiao suddenly told the people she found another name, Qiu Lily and Junjun were a little confused. Lin Xiao took the writing board in Xiaodong's hand, wiped it, and wrote, "I am Lin Xiao, but this body belongs to Lu Tianyu. When I woke up, she was already dead. Otherwise, this body wouldn't have become a zombie, because when I woke up, I was already a zombie. There were more words, so she wrote a little smaller. Then she held it up for Xiedong to see. Chapter 179. After reading the words, Xiedong looked at her again. What did this mean? Another person was resurrected in Lu Tianyu's body? Transmigration? Soul rebirth? Or what the hell? But from Xiedong's feelings after interacting with Lin Xiao, she was indeed different from that hateful woman. But this was too unbelievable. If one still retained their memories after becoming a zombie, like him, then it was still in the past. But suddenly there was another person's memory. Did that mean that the two people's memories had merged? Xiedong wrote on the writing board again. Are you also in Lu Tianyu's memory? Lin Xiao nodded. Although Lu Tianyu's memory was still very chaotic, it still existed. Xiedong looked at her and couldn't understand what was going on with Lin Xiao for a while. He said he didn't believe it, but Lin Xiao had already proved it to him in many ways. To say that he believed it was too unbelievable. Did such a thing really happen in the world? But the apocalypse had come, animals and plants had mutated, more than 70% of the world's humans had become zombies or died, and psychics had appeared. What else couldn't happen? Xiedong's mind worked quickly, and he quickly accepted the fact. The current Lu Tianyu was not Lu Tianyu, but Lin Xiao. It was just that Lin Xiao had borrowed Lu Tianyu's body and name to appear in another form. He suddenly thought of a question and wrote, "Since you found your family, why didn't you just say your name?" Lin Xiao looked at him, and her eyes flashed. She took the writing board and erased his words. She wrote, "Have you heard of Pluto's base?" He held it up for Xiedong to see, and Xiedong nodded when he saw the Netherworld King. Of course, he knew that there were 8 survivor bases in China. East China's Sea City, Central China's Huaxia base, Northeast China's Black Dragon base, Mongolia's Mongolian Tribe base, West Songyun City, Yunnan's Sichuan Fire base, and South China's Hades and Earth Dragon bases. Seeing Xiedong nod, Lin Xiao wrote, "Do you know the leader of Pluto, Dark Flame?" Xiedong nodded again. Of course he knew one of the 2 bases in South China. However, Lin Xiao had previously said that she was going to the south to find someone, and now she mentioned Pluto's base. These relatives of hers should have been found in Pluto's base. She moved very quickly, and it only took a week to bring them back. Lin Xiao wrote again, "The Underworld King's base was destroyed not long ago. There is no more Underworld King's base now. Their leader had been forced to self-destruct, and they had escaped." Xiedong didn't know that the Netherworld King's base had already been cleaned up by the Earth Dragon base. After hearing Lin Xiao's words, he looked at Lin Xiao with a dumbfounded expression. He was stunned for a few seconds. "Wu, is this for real?" He didn't know how to respond and blurted out the question. Lin Xiao nodded and wrote, "You might not know their identities." She then told Xiedong about Lin Feng's group and Yuan Tianqing's identity. She also told Xiedong that Lin Feng's group was the family of the leader of the Netherworld King's base. Yuan Tianqing was still the vice leader. Finally, she wrote a few big words for him. The original name of Netherflame is also Lin Xiao. At this time, Zhou Lily and Jun Jun had already come over. While the 2 of them were writing, the 2 of them finally couldn't help but be curious about Lin Xiao and came over to take a look. When the 3 of them heard Lin Xiao's last sentence, they didn't know how to react. Jun Jun looked at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao meant that the leader of Netherflame was also called Lin Xiao, and she was also called Lin Xiao. Relatives were the same. So they were the same person? "Huh. Your Netherflame? That leader?" Jun Jun exclaimed as she pointed at Lin Xiao in astonishment. Zhou Lily and Xiedong looked at her with the same expression. Lin Xiao shook her head and wrote again, "Relatives are still relatives, but I don't have any memories of the 5 years after the apocalypse. My memories before I became like this are still from before the apocalypse. I don't know what happened to me to become like this." Xiedong and the other 2 looked at her in confusion. What did this mean? Amnesia? Lin Xiao continued to write, "I think I have amnesia. I feel like the Lin Xiao in the Underworld King's base is another person. So when I have time, I want to go to the south again." The 3 of them slowly digested what Lin Xiao said about her current situation. Lin Xiao was someone who came from the apocalypse. When she woke up, she found that she had become a zombie and the entire world had changed. But she was still able to adapt and accept this world, as well as this tattered body. This was also because her mental fortitude was strong enough, so she didn't delay and directly went to her hometown in the south to find her relatives. At that time, she probably didn't even know if her relatives were still around. Anyone who suddenly woke up 5 years after the apocalypse would find that the entire world had changed. Knowing that so many people had died, she was still determined to go back to find her relatives. They didn't know what made her so determined. Wasn't she afraid that she wouldn't be able to find them? Wasn't she afraid that her relatives might have become zombies or been fed to zombies in the past 5 years? Although she had found them now, thinking about Lin Xiao's feelings before she found her family. How lost was she? After thinking about many things, the three zombies weren't in a good mood. Xiedong was a little better, although he sympathized with Lin Xiao. But he was a special forces soldier, so even if his emotions changed, he would quickly adjust. The two female zombies were different. Women were sentimental creatures after all. It was the same even if they became zombies. Lin Xiao felt their strong emotional fluctuations and suddenly wrote with a smile, "Don't be like this. Haven't I already found my family?" Qiu Lily and Junjun looked at her. "What if you don't find them? Are you going to keep looking?" Lin Xiao nodded to the two. If she didn't continue looking, she didn't know what was the point of living in her current state. Xiedong held his chin and thought about it. Now Lin Xiao had found her family, but she found out that there was another her, and she was dead. Then in her current situation, could it be that she was forced to self-destruct her energy core not long ago, and then directly ran into the body of Lu Tianyu who had just died? In the end, she lost part of her memory? This possibility made a little more sense. Otherwise, how could she explain that she was called Lin Xiao, and that leader called Hellfire was also called Lin Xiao? However, both of their relatives were the same. No wonder Lin Xiao told those people that her name was Lu Tianyu. Now she was dead, ran into another zombie's body to resurrect, and lost the memory of the past few years after the apocalypse. If she directly told her relatives that she was Lin Xiao, they would probably beat her up. After all, there was the possibility of another person. No, another zombie pretending to be the deceased relative to get close to them. Under such circumstances, a normal person would not believe it. Qiu Lily, on the other hand, did not think as much as Xiedong. She only wanted to ask Lin Xiao, "Ayaya, how long do we have to stay here? When are you going south?" Chapter 180. Lin Xiao wrote on the board, "We should leave here in a few days. I talked with them today. We should find another place to build our base. This place is not suitable." She thought of this problem when she talked with Yuan Tianqing today. She just didn't bring it up right away. She planned to talk about the location of the base with them tomorrow. Xiedong took the board and wrote, "Have you thought about where to go?" Lin Xiao wrote, "I want to go to a big city that is more prosperous. And it's a zombie city that no one has been to. With her and Qiu Lily's existence, they could go to a more advanced city to build a base. At that time, she and Qiu Lily could drive a large number of zombies out of the city and let them form a natural zombie isolation zone around the city. It would make it harder for people outside to come in and make trouble. The resources preserved in a big city were, of course, much better than a small county on the border. As long as they solved the problem of zombies, they could live in peace. Moreover, those big cities had their own areas divided by high-level zombies. It just so happened that she needed the energy of the zombie cores to upgrade Little Man. Seeing what Lin Xiao wrote, Xiedong was the first to understand her intention. Although Qiu Lily didn't quite understand why she wanted to find a zombie city, she didn't care that much. She would go wherever Lin Xiao went. Junjun first thought about the number of zombies in the zombie city. She felt that it would be very dangerous for Lin Xiao's relatives to go there with them. But she quickly thought of the zombies in front of her. One was a level 6 king. One was a powerful mutated zombie whose level she couldn't sense, and the other seemed to be a mutated male zombie. With these few, even if there were more ordinary zombies, she didn't need to be afraid. But which city should she go to first? Was it far away or near? The drive from here to Sea City was only 10 hours a day. It seemed a little close. She had to find a more suitable place further away. In fact, when it came to cities with more people, the south was more densely populated. But the south was too close to the Lin family's enemy, so she could only find a zombie city in Jia province. Thinking about it, it seemed that Hangzhou was the only place with more people, and it was not far. If she went a little further, she would reach the center of Hangzhou. It wouldn't be too far. Lin Xiao wrote, in the downtown area of Hangzhou. The people from the Sea City base should have been there. But there should still be some restricted areas. I will discuss with them tomorrow. First, he would go to Haiqing base to find people and ask about Zombie City. Qiu Lily pouted unhappily when she heard that they were going to Sea City base. However, she didn't make a sound and just quietly moved 2 steps to the side. Lin Xiao looked at Qiu Lily, then at Xiedong and wrote, but we don't plan on entering Haiqing. We have the zombie virus in our bodies, so we can't pass the inspection at the entrance of the base. Or I can work separately from them. Xiedong nodded. They just didn't look like zombies on the outside. The virus was still present in his body. At this time, Lin Xiao suddenly wrote, is it okay for you to follow me like this? She had asked Xiedong to follow her because she wanted to use her lake water to suppress his desire to eat humans. He was afraid that he would be controlled by his desires in the future and become a man-eating zombie who couldn't control himself. Then he would be in big trouble in the future. But Lin Xiao didn't know if Xiedong would always follow her. He might have other ideas. Junjun followed him for the child's safety, and she didn't know where he was going. Now she completely trusted him, and Qiu Lily also wanted him to follow her. After these days of observation, he found that she was also a zombie with strong self-control. At least she wouldn't eat humans. Xiedong looked at Lin Xiao and shook his head. He expressed that he didn't care. He had already told her that he would follow her, but halfway through, he was defeated by the Ice-type level 5 zombie. Those days when he was separated from Lin Xiao, he was a little lost. He originally wanted to find Lin Xiao later, but he only had 2 legs. How could he follow a 4-wheeled car? And his strength was low, and he didn't have a space to hide from danger like Lin Xiao. So he hid for a few days, and when he sensed high-level zombies and humans, he would choose to avoid them. He didn't know if Lin Xiao would return to Haiqing base, so he didn't foolishly wait in the same place. In the end, in less than 2 days, he found a corpse core, but it also attracted trouble. But fortunately, he suddenly sensed that Lin Xiao wasn't far from him, and he didn't know how this feeling came about. It didn't seem like the feeling he had with zombies. Seeing that he didn't have any objections, Lin Xiao was slightly relieved. She looked at Junjun and found that the dark circles under her eyes seemed to have lightened a little. She wrote, Junjun, did you notice that your dark circles are getting smaller? Lin Xiao raised the board to show her. Seeing her words, Junjun looked at Lin Xiao with surprise and confusion, and then looked at Qiu Lily, because she didn't understand what Lin Xiao meant. Seeing Junjun looking at her, Qiu Lily also looked back curiously at Lin Xiao's words. Then she carefully looked around Junjun's eyes, and found that there seemed to be a lot less dark areas. And it wasn't just her eyes that had changed. Her skin had also changed. Her originally pale face with a little liver mortis spots was still pale, but the faint liver mortis spots were gone. Xiedong had never seen Junjun before, so he didn't know how Junjun looked before and now. But he saw that Qiu Lily looked a little surprised. Lin Xiao thought about her lake water. It was becoming more and more useful. Not only could it heal the living, but it could also purify zombies. She put the board on the table, suddenly stood up and walked to Junjun's side. She pulled open the clothes on Junjun's shoulder and saw that the wound inside had indeed lightened. Junjun's wound was caused by a zombie bite. When Lin Xiao saw her for the first time, there was still a blood stain on her shoulder. At that time, Lin Xiao secretly observed her wound. Compared to now, it was much deeper. It seemed that Junjun drank a lot of water in the space, and she used the lake water to bathe. But at least she fell into the space with a bucket and used a cloth to clean her body. She wasn't like Lin Xiao, who took off her clothes and soaked in the lake. Lin Xiao had noticed the changes in Junjun's body 2 days ago, but at that time, she had almost found Lin Feng. She didn't carefully observe Junjun's changes, but there was a great improvement in her aura. After thinking for a while, Lin Xiao wrote, from today on, you should soak in the lake for an hour every day. If you don't dare to go into the lake, you can use the bathtub in this hotel room to soak. After reading Lin Xiao's words, Junjun looked at her doubtfully. Lin Xiao wrote, you should be leveling up soon. Your thinking ability and adaptability are much better than when I first met you. Didn't you notice? Chapter 181. The next day, Lin Xiao told Junjun and Qiu Lily to stay in the room while she brought Xie Dong to Yuan Tianqing's room. The door was open, and Wei Jingxin didn't stop her. He just let her and Xie Dong in. Everyone in the room was there except for a few soldiers. The Lin family, Long Qingying, Du Yuanxing, and Yuan Tianqing were all in the room. They seemed to be waiting for Lin Xiao's arrival. Only Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing were sitting on the sofa, while Mother Lin and Cheng Wangxue were sitting on the chairs by the window. Lin Xiao walked in and nodded to everyone with a smile. She walked to the empty sofa and sat down. Xie Dong was standing behind the back of her chair like Junjun did last time. His appearance naturally attracted everyone's attention. Apart from Long Qingying and Lin Wanwan, who had observed him from a close distance yesterday, everyone else was watching from the window upstairs. Seeing a human suddenly appear next to Lin Xiao, Lin Feng and the others were already used to it. Previously, it was the red-eyed female zombie, and yesterday there was another female zombie carrying a human child. Now there was a man with a straight back, chest out, and walking properly. Needless to say, he had the posture of a soldier. Moreover, Lin Feng and Yuan Tianqing were familiar with the aura he exuded. But this didn't attract their attention. The people active outside the base were either metahumans or soldiers. Metahumans were strong in individual combat, and soldiers had good mental fortitude and reaction speed. There were also some strong people who had slowly developed their own abilities. They met these people outside the base. Seeing these people outside the base was very normal. Therefore, Yuan Tianqing and Lin Feng didn't pay too much attention to Xie Dong. After Lin Xiao sat down, she directly spoke. Yesterday you said that we need to find a new place to build our base. And it's better to find a zombie city. We discussed it last night and decided to go to the central area of Hangzhou. There will definitely be a lot of zombies there. Yuan Tianqing took out a map of China and spread it on the table. He pointed to the provincial capital of Hangzhou. Lin Xiao nodded and took out a pen and a writing board. She wrote, "Maybe we should go find out about the restricted area first, then make a decision." Yuan Tianqing looked at her and asked, "You mean, we should first find out where the restricted area of the provincial capital is? Are we going to charge into that restricted area?" Lin Xiao nodded and wrote, "Aren't you guys going to see city to look for someone first? We can get some people to come back and observe the terrain, or we can split up." Yuan Tianqing and Lin Feng looked at each other. Lin Feng said in surprise, "Are you trying to say that you'll scout the area first? Shall we go find our people, and then listen to your news before making a plan?" Lin Xiao nodded. Yuan Tianqing thought for a moment and said, "That works too. We still don't know if we can find Li Zheng and the others. If they're at the base, we'll find them soon enough. But if they're outside the base, we'll have to spend more time looking for them. In that case, you can take advantage of this time to check out the situation in the city center." After saying that, he looked at Lin Feng, seeking his opinion. Lin Feng didn't have any objections after hearing his words. He nodded to him and said, "You guys are zombies, so you can't follow us into the base. It was a good time to investigate the situation in Zombie City, but someone still needs to stay here to guard. As for the personnel allocation, I'll stay here." They had already asked Lin Wanwan to put all the food into her space, but if they wanted to leave, they still had to dismantle the solar equipment and move it away. In order to prevent someone from snatching the solar equipment, they naturally had to leave a strong person behind. Lin Feng felt that he was the most suitable. Yuan Tianqing could take a few people to see city base, so there was no problem at all. And this zombie Lu Tianyu, no one was more suitable than them to go to Zombie City. He thought that Yuan Tianqing and Lin Xiao had the same idea as him. Lin Xiao wrote, "I agree." Yuan Tianqing nodded and said, "Okay, I'll take the Yuanqing and the other three to see city in the afternoon. Lin Feng, you and Qingqing stay here to protect Madam and the children." Lin Xiao and Lin Feng both nodded. Lin Xiao wrote on the writing board, "I'll leave tomorrow." After agreeing, Lin Xiao left the room where Yuan Tianqing and the others were. Along the way, she didn't care at all about other people glancing at her bald head. She just felt a little cold on the top of her head. After returning to Qiu Lily and the others' room, Lin Xiao filled the bathtub in their room with the water from the spatial lake and let Junjun soak in it. However, when Junjun went in to take a bath, Tong Tong didn't have anyone to hold him, and the naughty child didn't let anyone else touch him. He only recognized his mother. She put him on the bed alone, but as soon as Jun entered the bathroom, he immediately burst into tears. After a while, Lin Xiao stuffed Tong Tong into Jun's arms and pushed the two of them into the bathroom. Go to the bubble. After she was done, Lin Xiao went to Xiaodong's room. She filled a bathtub of lake water for him and let him soak in it as well. After Lin Xiao's space was upgraded, the energy in the lake water was much richer than before. Therefore, when Lin Xiao closed her eyes, she could still see the green lake water in the bathtub. The color wasn't as dark as the lake in her space, but pure green. When she opened her eyes, the water was still transparent. In the afternoon, Lin Xiao stood by the window and watched Yuan Tianxing and Du Yuanxing take Lu Junjia, Xinglu, and Su Liang out. When they passed by her iron cage, the 5 men even ran over to take a look. At night, Lin Xiao put Jun, his mother, and Qiu Lily into the space and let them rest in the space. She stayed in the room outside of the space. Lin Xiao turned off the light and lay on the bed. A pair of dark and gloomy eyes stared at the ceiling, glinting eerily in the darkness. She was a zombie, so she didn't need to sleep, but she didn't know what to do at night, so she could only lie on the bed with her eyes closed. Just as she was lying down, Lin Xiao suddenly turned her eyes. She looked out of the window. There was no movement outside the window, but she smelled human. It wasn't the smell of everyone in this building, but someone else. Lin Xiao immediately turned over and sat up, then stood up and walked out of the window. She looked at the black and white TV outside. Her eyes could see clearly in the day, but at night, she could still see everything clearly in the darkness. It was just that what appeared in front of him was a sea of grayish-white. Lin Xiao crossed her arms in front of her chest and quietly leaned against the window. A pair of black eyes stared ahead. She had just killed one of them yesterday. Were they here to die again? That's right, Lin Xiao smelled the smell. It was the people who chased after Xiaodong yesterday. Chapter 182. A few hundred meters away from Lin Xiao, someone was secretly observing the hotel building where Lin Feng and the others were staying with a pair of binoculars. How is it? Did you find anything? Shoo, don't be noisy. I'm looking at a building with dozens of floors. Only the rooms on that floor have lights on. The power in this city has been cut off for a long time, but the lights are still on. It must be solar energy. Solar energy? Are you sure? Why don't you tell me, how do they generate electricity? If it's solar energy, then no one has been here before. It seems that the people there killed the level 5 zombie leader. Looking at the size of this hotel, there must be an ice house that hasn't been opened, and there may be an automatic solar energy transmission device. Do you think there is a lot of food frozen and preserved? There should be. Then should we go over? Don't rush. Let's observe the situation. Okay. Think about it. There was a level 5 zombie leader nearby, and now they can stay here safely. It means that the level 5 zombie has been killed. If there aren't more than 3 level 5 paranormals, then there must be a level 6 paranormal. We can't beat them with our current strength, so it's useless to go. You mean, you take 2 people back to the base and report to our deputy leader. With solar energy here, he will definitely come. Okay, we'll do as you say. Lin Xiao could feel the presence of the people in the darkness, but she couldn't hear the voices hundreds of meters away, no matter how sensitive her ears were. And the person's voice was also very low. She could smell and see the faint flash of the binoculars in the darkness. The other party was still, probably not clear about the situation, and was observing. Lin Xiao suddenly stood up, and her figure flashed and disappeared from the window. A transparent figure flashed out of the window and silently jumped in the direction of the other party. A few hundred meters wasn't far, and Lin Xiao only needed to jump a few times to reach the roof of the building where the people were. She walked around the edge of the rooftop and found 2 cars parked in a dark alley. It was the 2 she saw yesterday. At this moment, a few figures quietly jumped out of the building and got into one of the cars. Soon, the car started up and drove out. Lin Xiao looked at the commotion downstairs, then turned his head to feel the aura on the other side. Most of the people were still in the building, but a few had come out to drive out. What was he going to do? It seemed that these people had discovered the solar energy storage device that Lin Feng and the others had discovered and were observing the situation. But at this time, a few people suddenly left. Were they preparing to inform the others? Or could it be that they had already realized that their strength was inferior to Lin Feng and the others, and wanted to go back to find stronger helpers? With this speculation, Lin Xiao immediately jumped down from the roof. He chased after the car in the direction that it had left. Her running speed on the roof was much faster than the cars on the ground. Soon, she reached the roof of a low-rise building in front of her. There happened to be a flyover on this road, and Lin Xiao flashed onto the flyover. When she climbed to the edge of the bridge and saw that the car was about to pass under the bridge, she immediately jumped down and silently landed on the roof of the car. "Boss, why do you trust him so much? What if they take the opportunity while we are away to take the solar energy? Are you stupid? There is a level 5 zombie that often appears here. Now that those people can live in that building, do you think the zombie leader that can smell people from far away won't attack them? They must have been killed by those people, and they are much stronger than us. If LV Doyao wants to rush up and take the solar energy by himself, even if he has the heart and the guts, he doesn't have the strength." "Oh, that's true." Lin Xiao stood on the roof of the car and listened to the conversation below. She thought that her guess was right. These people wanted to take the solar energy from Lin Feng and the others, but they were worried that they weren't strong enough. Therefore, a few of them left to look for reinforcements. She sneered and appeared in a flash. She took out the black glasses from her pocket and put them on. "It's fine if you guys found out, but you still want to take it. Are you afraid that you can't take it and want to go back to find help?" Lin Xiao squatted down on the roof and quietly extended her hand to the driver's window. A thick black mist that could be clearly seen in the darkness came out of his hand and then dispersed into the gap of the car window. The fog dispersed after entering the car, leaving a faint black gas in the dark car. The few people didn't notice it, but soon, the black gas drilled into their ears. The driver was looking left and right at the road in front of the car. Suddenly, his whole body stiffened and then stopped moving. "Huh, what is this?" Shen Chengming, who was in the passenger seat, noticed a wisp of black gas floating towards his ear. He subconsciously avoided it, but when he turned around, he suddenly saw the stiff face of the driver. He didn't even care about the direction of the car. Seeing that the car was slowly moving to the side, Shen Chengming was shocked. He quickly leaned his upper body and rushed over, reaching out to hold the steering wheel. "Fuck, how do you drive? We're going to crash." After holding the steering wheel, he cursed while looking at the road ahead. When he turned around and was about to continue cursing, he suddenly saw the driver's face slowly dissipate. It was like a human skin face was suddenly melted by fire. The face melted, and then the whole head melted. Soon, Shen Chengming saw that only the body below the neck of the driver was left. His head had completely disappeared. Shen Chengming, who suddenly saw this in the middle of the night, was stunned. His expression froze for a few seconds, and then he suddenly reacted. He turned his head to look at the few people in the back seat and found that they were the same as the driver. They had all lost their heads and their bodies were stiff. Shen Chengming only felt a chill on his back. When he turned around, he found that the driver's neck was also gone, and the part below the neck was strangely melting. He immediately let go of the steering wheel, turned around, and quickly opened the door to jump out, regardless of whether the car was still driving or not. After falling to the ground, he rolled over and squatted there to look at the car. After Shen Chengming got out, there was no direction to control the car. Soon, it scraped the roadside and hit the cement flower bed next to it. Screech! Shen Chengming panted slightly as he watched the car stop after the collision with a vigilant look on his face. He had no idea what happened. Why did the few people suddenly lose their heads? It was like a horror movie. It was too exciting. Chapter 183. For Shen Chengming, not only was it exciting, but it was also accompanied by a strong sense of danger. Seeing that the car had stopped, Shen Chengming squatted on the spot and looked around vigilantly. Then, he stood up and slowly walked towards the car. Holding a flashlight in one hand, he looked around vigilantly as he leaned towards the car window. Standing by the door of the passenger seat, he shone the flashlight in. Then, he realized. The people in the car had disappeared. All of them had disappeared. Shen Chengming took a few more glances and immediately retreated away from the car. When he got out of the car just now, he didn't see anyone get out of the car. So, the people had disappeared directly in the car. Thinking about the scene of the people's heads melting and dissipating, Shen Qingming felt increasingly cold. Moreover, the reason why he retreated away from the car was because he saw the inside of the car disappearing. Not only were the people gone, but the car and the chair were also gone. He also saw that other than the chair, even the car was slowly disappearing from the inside, and the speed at which it was disappearing was spreading outwards. Just as he retreated step by step, all the hair on his body suddenly stood on end. His heart skipped a beat, and an ominous feeling rose behind him. However, his sense of crisis came too late. Just as he had a bad feeling and was about to dodge to the side, a hand with 5 sharp claws appeared less than a meter behind him and slashed at his neck. Puff! With a slight sound, Shen Qingming froze and couldn't move. Lin Xiao, who had appeared out of nowhere, took a step forward. She reached out and took off Shen Qingming's head. She cut off the shell and took out the core. Then, she threw the head away. That was it. She threw the energy core into the lake of space and then raised her hand in the direction of the car. A wisp of black gas jumped out of the car. Lin Xiao didn't know if it was because it absorbed the energy of the people in the car or something, but she felt that the black gas was thicker than when she put it in earlier. Lin Xiao glanced at the car. From the outside, she couldn't see anything, but it was already empty. She turned and ran to the building next to her. She ran over and jumped, grabbed the edge of the wall, and flipped up. Soon, she climbed to the top of the building. If these people were not targeting Lin Feng and the others, Lin Xiao would not have been so ruthless. However, since they had already discovered this place, Lin Feng and the others would not immediately dismantle the solar device and leave. These people also wanted to kill Lin Feng and the others, so there was no need to show mercy. She would deal with anything that could threaten Lin Feng and the others. He continued to jump down from the rooftop and returned to the building where these people had appeared before. He discovered that the group of people who had stayed behind were still standing guard at the same spot. "Boss, tell him to go back and report to the vice leader." "Do you think he can bring the vice leader here?" "I think so." "Sure. Don't be noisy. I feel like something's not right." "What happened?" "I just found out that the surroundings are very quiet, and there are no zombies. After observing for an entire afternoon, I found that there were no zombies near the hotel. They didn't even have guards." "What? No guards? Aren't you afraid of being attacked by zombies?" "I don't know what's going on. We have to go closer and observe. Tell everyone to pack up and dive another 200 meters toward the hotel." "All right." Lin Xiao stood in the corner behind them, covered by a layer of black gas. In this pitch-black room, no one noticed that a figure had snuck in at some point and was standing in the corner, listening to their conversation. Her observation skills were too poor. She only noticed the difference in the surroundings after observing for an entire afternoon. Even if this was a county, it was still in the center of the city. Although the number of zombies wouldn't be dense, there were no zombies within a radius of 1 mile. She should have noticed something was wrong. When they moved out, Lin Xiao had already switched to stealth mode. She stared at them as they left. Before the last person went out, suddenly, she quietly appeared and directly covered the mouth of the last person. At the same time, the black gas in her palm rushed into the man's mouth and nose. The man immediately stopped moving. Lin Xiao gently put the body on the ground. She immediately quietly followed. At the corner of the stairs, she dragged the last person back and skillfully used the black gas to kill him. She leaned against the handrail of the stairs and looked down. The people in front were still walking down, as if they didn't notice that 2 people were missing behind them. Just like that, Lin Xiao went to clean up the people in the back without the people in the front noticing, until one of them suddenly turned around to pay attention to the movement behind him. When he turned around, there was nothing behind him. "Old A? Old B? Hey, why are you guys so slow? What's going on?" The people in front heard his voice and stopped to look back at him. "Old A and Old B are gone. Where did they go?" "I don't know." After saying a few words, they still didn't see anyone coming down. They didn't even hear the footsteps from above. There was no movement at all. LV Doyao said to the person behind him, "Old C, go up and take a look." At this time, Lin Xiao jumped out from the window next to the stairs and then landed on the ground from the 6th floor. She walked to the exit of the stairs and waited there. Sure enough, after a while, she saw them coming down in a panic. Suddenly, a few people were missing, but they didn't see any enemies or anything else. So, those teammates disappeared under unknown circumstances. They didn't know if they were dead or alive. There wasn't even a corpse. In the face of an unknown enemy, they couldn't remain calm. But when they came down, they suddenly saw a person standing on the ground at the exit. They shone the flashlight and saw that he was wearing sunglasses in the middle of the night. His head was smooth. "Who are you?" LV Doyao immediately shone the flashlight into Lin Xiao's eyes and asked. Lin Xiao ignored him and looked at the people behind him. They were probably all here. A wisp of black gas slowly emerged from his palm. The people behind LV Doyao all pointed their guns at Lin Xiao. Only LV Doyao didn't. His perception was still very sharp. When he saw Lin Xiao, he felt the murderous intent from her. After thinking for a while, he quickly thought of the people at the hotel opposite them. He thought that the other party had discovered them and was now starting to fight back. "Was that you just now?" Lin Xiao didn't answer. Did you capture our people?" A man behind LV Doyao asked Lin Xiao. A faint black mist spread out in the night, surrounding the 5 or 6 of them. But the other party didn't notice the existence of the black fog. Unbeknownst to them, the black fog slowly approached their heads. Then, it entered through their noses and ears. Very quickly, these people were all frozen in place, motionless like human-shaped statues. Only LV Doyao suddenly retreated when the black fog approached. His figure flashed, and he dodged to the side. Chapter 184. Lin Xiao's figure also flashed and disappeared. LV Doyao dodged to the side and found a cover to squat down. He looked around vigilantly for Lin Xiao's figure. But in the blink of an eye, he lost the target of the mysterious bald man. He knew that they were in big trouble this time. The other party didn't even intend to communicate with them and attacked as soon as they arrived. LV Doyao glanced at his teammates, who were frozen in various movements, and had a very bad premonition in his heart. He didn't see Lin Xiao's face clearly. It was dark all around. He only saw a conspicuous bald head and a pair of pitch-black glasses. He couldn't see anything else. From the appearance, it was a man who wasn't very tall. LV Doyao didn't know that Lin Xiao was already standing behind him. The transparent hand reached half a meter away from the back of his head, and the figure flashed. The figure flashed and turned from transparent to solid. At the same time, when she appeared, the claw that she had extended to the back of LV Doyao's head stabbed forward. Oof! LV Doyao felt a chill on his back. Then the back of his head was pierced. He stared blankly ahead with his eyes wide open. Oof! Lin Xiao withdrew her hand. There was an energy core between her fingers. It was glowing faintly. Oof! After Lin Xiao withdrew her hand, LV Doyao's body went limp and he fell to the ground. Lin Xiao looked up at the people who were slowly disappearing. She raised her hand and waved. A few strands of black gas floated back and twined around her hand. She pointed at LV Doyao on the ground. The black gas followed her hand and floated to LV Doyao's body. Soon, LV Doyao, who was on the ground, disappeared completely. No one knew that their team was in danger. Except for the man who had stepped on Xiedong's chest at the beginning, there was also a corpse. The others had already been cleanly dissolved and had disappeared from this world. Originally, when Xiedong didn't allow them to be killed, he had planned to let them go. He didn't expect that just one day later, they would come to him looking for death. Sometimes, people were really unlucky. Their lives were too cheap. After Lin Xiao recalled the black gas, she threw the energy core in her hand into the lake in the space. Then she slowly walked back to the hotel. When he returned to the hotel, he saw a man squatting beside the big iron cage. He was holding a few big mice and playing with the tortoises inside. Lin Xiao walked to the front of the cage and looked at the turtle inside. He opened his mouth and said, "Killed the people yesterday." Xiedong threw the mouse into the cage and stood up. He turned around and nodded at her, indicating that he understood what she meant. When Lin Xiao left the room, he sensed it, but he didn't follow them out. He just came to the parking lot and waited. He sensed Lin Xiao's movements. This was the second time. His enemy always came to Lin Xiao's muzzle. It was only natural for him to be killed by her. Lin Xiao continued to walk in the direction of the hotel room and climbed up to the window outside the building. After becoming a zombie, she liked to climb walls. He did not know why Xiaodong looked strangely at Lin Xiao, who had slipped in through the window and silently walked into the hall. After Yuan Tianqing left with Du Yuanxing and Lu Junjia, the only guards left were Wei Jingxin and Xiao Wenxing. The two of them could only guard at the door of Lin Feng's room. The next day, Lin Xiao set off with Xiaodong early in the morning. She left Qiu Lili and Junjun in the hotel. On one hand, she wanted Junjun and Tong Tong to get closer to Mrs. Lin and Lin Xiaolu. On the other hand, she wanted Qiu Lili to stay here. If anything happened, she would be a great help. Although Qiu Lili might not be willing to help, she would do it for Lin Xiao's sake. She would at least protect the people in the hotel. When Lin Xiao set off for downtown Hangzhou, a team of cars came out from Haiqing Base. In the middle of the off-road vehicle sat Wu Qingyue, Xiao Yunlong, Meng Yu, and little Wu Yueling. The driver was Xiao Liqing, and Meng Yu sat in the front passenger seat. In the back seat, little Yueling sat between Wu Qingyue and Xiao Yunlong. Xiao Yunlong teased little Yueling and said, "Do you think we will encounter a level 6 zombie king when we go to downtown Hangzhou? That is a zombie city with at least 1 million zombies. There must be a lot of level 5 zombie leaders. I just don't know if there are any kings." Wu Qingyue smiled and said, "Why doesn't your information work? Didn't you hear Zhou Shihui say that there is a king there?" Xiao Yunlong looked at him in surprise. "Hey, there really is one. Why didn't I know? Did he tell you?" Wu Qingyue just looked at him with an ambiguous smile and did not speak. Xiao Yunlong looked at his eyes, and suddenly his eyes flashed. He asked, "The purpose of your trip this time, is it?" At this time, Meng Yu turned around and said, "Don't you know? This time he is specifically looking for the Zombie King. This is the information he dug out from Leader Zhou with great difficulty." Xiao Yunlong looked at Meng Yu and then at Wu Qingyue. He suddenly pointed to little Yueling with dissatisfaction and said, "Since you are going to find the king, why do you bring Lingling? It's too dangerous. What if something happens?" He originally thought it was just to go out to collect supplies. It was the safest for little Yueling to stay with Wu Qingyue. But now that he wanted to kill the Zombie King, the degree of danger had risen by several levels. The fighting strength of the Zombie King was legendary. Xiao Yunlong had never seen it before. But the few times a king appeared, most of the people who went would die inside. It was already lucky to be able to escape, let alone kill a king realm cultivator. Unless there was a level 7 ability user like Wu Qingyue, or he could kill the Zombie King. But the battle would not be easy. At this time, Meng Yu revealed, "I heard that this king is Thunder Attribute." She looked at Wu Qingyue. Thunder Attribute? When Xiao Yunlong heard this news, his eyes immediately turned to Wu Qingyue. He immediately understood why he was in such a hurry to bring them out of the base. But, isn't that more dangerous? No, we should send little Yueling back. Don't play such a joke with my goddaughter's life. Xiao Yunlong was about to turn his head and ask Xiao Liqing to stop when Wu Qingyue quickly pulled him back. "Wait a minute. Listen to me first. What's the hurry? I'm going to look for that king on my own, so I'll leave Lingling to the two of you. With you here, what can go wrong? Right?" Wu Qingyue pulled him back with one hand and said. Xiao Yunlong was stunned for a moment, staring at him in disbelief. "What? You want to go alone? That's too dangerous." Wu Qingyue looked at him with a smile and did not speak. Meng Yu said coldly, "What else? You're going too? What are you going to do? Drag us down?" Xiao Yunlong. Chapter 185. Xiao Yunlong looked at Wu Qingyue with a dumbfounded expression. "Hey, if you don't want us to help, then why did you bring so many people out?" Wu Yueling looked up at him with her big eyes, and then climbed onto Wu Qingyue's leg. It is said that a daughter is a man's lover in his previous life, and Wu Yueling was also very attached to Wu Qingyue. Everyone felt that this sentence was not wrong. Wu Qingyue held his daughter and said with a faint smile, "Are you stupid? I said we are going to find the Zombie King. I did not say we are not going to collect supplies. No one has been to that place before because the zombies are too dense. Now for the sake of the king, we have destroyed it. Can't the supplies in its territory belong to us? If we can't find the Zombie King, Then our main job is to collect supplies. Mengyu rolled her eyes at Xiao Yunlong and said, I don't know how your brain grows. But forget it. I think you are malnourished to the limbs of your body, but your brain is malnourished. As she spoke, she turned back to look at the road in front of the car. Xiao Yunlong, who was said to be malnourished, you, I don't mind if you say I am stupid. What malnourished brain? Do you have to beat around the bush? Can you say it simply? Mengyu rolled her eyes at the front, and Wu Chengyue's smile deepened a little. Only Wu Yueling, with a pair of bright black eyes, stared at them from left to right. Xiao Yunlong tapped her little nose and said, Tell me, can you understand your Aunt Yu's words? She said that my brain is malnourished. That means I am stupid. Stupid, do you understand? Lingling, do you know what is stupid? At this time, Wu Chengyue stroked his daughter's hair, bowed his head and said to his daughter with a smile, Don't talk to him, you will be infected by him. As soon as she heard that becoming stupid was contagious, Wu Yueling immediately retracted her hands and feet and distanced herself from Xiao Yunlong. As soon as he saw Wu Yueling's disgusted look, Xiao Yunlong couldn't bear it. He said, Hey, how can I be infected? How am I stupid? In fact, I know what your father said. How could I not know? As he spoke, he teased Wu Yueling. Wu Yueling ignored him and turned her face to the side. At this time, Xiao Yunlong suddenly saw that there seemed to be something like grass in her pocket and reached out. Hey, Lingling, what's this? As he spoke, he grabbed a strand of grass from Wu Yueling's pocket when she wasn't paying attention. Only then did he realize that it was a grass dragonfly. Moreover, the grass had already dried and turned into a dull brown color. The grass dragonflies were woven in a very unique way. Wu Yueling felt something in her pocket being pulled out and immediately turned around to look. She saw Xiao Yunlong take out her grass dragonfly, but held it in his hand and looked at it. She pounced over and tried to snatch the grass dragonfly back. She didn't care if her stupidity was contagious. She just wanted to get her things back. But Xiao Yunlong was also an adult. He did not intend to return it to her. How could she snatch it away? With a lift of his hand, the grass dragonfly flew up and landed on his other hand. Hey, Lingling, tell your godfather. Where did you get this? We don't seem to have woven this for you. Xiao Yunlong held the grass dragonfly and moved it left and right, not letting Wu Yueling touch it. Wu Chengyue also curiously looked at the dragonfly in Xiao Yunlong's hand. He did not notice that his daughter had this thing before. Mengyu also looked back and saw that the grass dragonfly in Xiao Yunlong's hand was quite cute, but the color was dry. Hey, this hand-weaving is very exquisite, she said as she reached out to take it from Xiao Yunlong's hand and placed it in her palm. Wu Yueling thrashed about on Xiao Yunlong's body, but did not manage to grab her little baby. Now that she saw the grass dragonfly in Mengyu's hand, she suddenly realized that her little baby would not return to her hands so soon. Her little face pulled back and her mouth pouted. Then she angrily sat back between the two people. Hey, Lingling, are you angry? Wu Chengyue looked at her in surprise. He found that in these few seconds, his daughter's expression suddenly became a little vivid. Xiao Yunlong also observed Wu Yueling's expression, his eyes shining as he said, I think it's true. Didn't you find that after this child came back, a lot of her psychological activities are now shown on her face? This is a good phenomenon. In fact, they had long discovered that after Wu Yueling came back, she was no longer so afraid of people. At least she was already familiar with Xiao Yunlong. She would not hide at the first sight like before. She was not so resistant to Xiao Liqing, who was driving in the front. At this time, a small grass seedling drilled out of Mengyu's hand, the emerald green leaves emitting a faint light. One of the leaves of the grass was placed on the grass dragonfly. Mengyu smiled at Wu Yueling and said, Lingling, look. As she spoke, a faint light green color slowly spread from her small grass leaf to the withered grass dragonfly, as if it had been dyed. Soon, the grass dragonfly turned green. It looked like it had regained its vitality. It looked like it was woven from freshly picked grass leaves. Wu Yueling was also stunned to see her grass dragonfly suddenly turn green. Then she stared fixedly at the grass dragonfly in Mengyu's hand, even forgetting to be angry. Mengyu handed the grass dragonfly to her and saw how nervous she was just now. Seeing her nervous appearance just now, She knew that she treasured this little toy. "Can I tell, Dad? Who made you such a beautiful grass dragonfly?" Wu Chengyue looked at Wu Yueling carefully, taking the grass dragonfly, and asked her with a smile. After Wu Yueling took the grass dragonfly, she just glanced at him and did not speak. Then, ignoring the others, she put the grass dragonfly back into her pocket. Holding it with one hand, she crawled away from Xiao Yunlong to the other side of Wu Chengyue. After crawling over, it was not enough. She pushed Wu Chengyue up with her hand. Wu Chengyue, who was pushed in the middle, Xiao Yunlong, who was not allowed to get close. Mingyu looked at them with a smile and said, "Our Lingling has grown up now. Don't think about bullying her. When she bears a grudge, you're dead." Wu Chengyue just smiled, stroked Wu Yueling's head lovingly, and hugged her to his side. It was Xiao Yunlong who looked at her strangely and said, "Where did this little girl get the grass dragonfly? Looking at its color, it seems that she has been weaving it for many days." Mingyu shook her head and said, "Anyway, it's not me. I don't know how to weave such little insects. And the grass dragonfly has no other hands and feet. It's very clean." Xiao Yunlong immediately looked at Wu Chengyue. Wu Chengyue said with a smile, "What are you looking at me for? Have you seen me weave this kind of little thing?" "Then who gave it to her?" Xiao Yunlong asked puzzledly. The child had basically been with them these days since she came back. She had not been in contact with other people. Where did this thing come from? Xiao Yunlong was puzzled, but Wu Chengyue thought of a possibility. Looking at the quality of the grass dragonfly, it should have been obtained before Lingling returned to him. She hid it so well that he did not find out that she had secretly hidden this thing. Chapter 186. On the other side, Lin Xiao and Xiedong were driving to the city. It was not far, only a few hours. The car was still Xiedong's original car, and the driver was Xiedong again. He was driving his own car. It had only been 10 days, but he already felt nostalgic. 3 hours later, they entered the city. The number of zombies had increased by several times, and there were zombies everywhere. The more they drove to the city center, the more zombies there were. All kinds of streets and alleys, and all kinds of buildings. There were zombies everywhere. The ordinary zombies on the road, after sensing Lin Xiao, they began to retreat from a distance of tens of meters, as if they were afraid of not being able to escape. They were all squeezing their way to the side alleys or roads. Xiedong drove the car smoothly, and Lin Xiao sat in the front passenger seat. She stretched out her hand to look at the situation outside. When the car passed by a bookstore, she reached out her hand to let Xiedong pull the car over. Xiedong turned the car to the bookstore and stopped in front of the store. Lin Xiao and he got out of the car at the same time and looked at the broken door of the bookstore. The two of them lifted their feet and walked in. Roar dash, but as soon as they entered the door, they suddenly heard a zombie's roar. There was a strong sense of fierceness in the sound and the intention to expel them. Lin Xiao and Xiedong knew that they had entered the small territory of a high-level zombie. Although this zombie's level was only around level 3, it was not very high. They looked up in the direction of the sound and saw a zombie lying on the railing of the second floor, staring at them with its teeth bared. Lin Xiao ignored it and calmly walked in, looking for it in the map area. Of course, she didn't plan to let this level 3 zombie go. A level 3 zombie core didn't have much energy, but no matter how small a mosquito's leg was, it was still meat. Xiedong didn't move and just glanced at Lin Xiao. As soon as Lin Xiao walked in, the zombie immediately roared again. Like a beast, it fiercely stared at Lin Xiao. Roar dash, the reason why this level 3 zombie dared to roar at Lin Xiao so openly was because she hid her breath before entering the door, because she had already sensed that there was a level 3 zombie here. Hearing the roar of the level 3 zombie, Lin Xiao continued walking forward. At this time, the zombie finally couldn't stand it anymore. It climbed up the railing and jumped down. It stepped on the top of the bookshelf and rushed towards Lin Xiao. It didn't think about why Lin Xiao didn't react to it at all. It just wanted to eliminate this fellow that dared to invade its territory as soon as possible. However, the zombie wasn't able to reach Lin Xiao's side. When it was a meter away, Lin Xiao didn't even look at it. He suddenly raised his hand and swung his claw at the menacing zombie. Plop, 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 with 2 sounds, The zombie split into two and fell to the ground beside her with a splash of black blood. Xiaodong looked at the dismembered zombie, turned around and leaned against the door. He crossed his arms and looked outside. It was almost noon and the sun was shining brightly outside. The temperature was actually very hot, but he couldn't feel it. Lin Xiao was the only one who felt it, so she wore a hat to block the sun. Otherwise, the sun would directly burn her bald head until it started to smoke. Lin Xiao looked for the location on the map. The bookstore wasn't big. There were some signs hanging on the wall, so she quickly found the map area. This place might have been swept by someone. When Lin Xiao arrived at the map area, she looked around and found that most of the maps were gone. But fortunately, there were still one or two left for her. Lin Xiao reached out and picked one up. She first shook off the dust on it, then patted it and shook it. Only then did she clean the thick layer of dust. She flipped through it. It was a tourist atlas. Although it wasn't very useful, it could still be used as a tourist map. She looked at another one. It was a driver's map. She took these two maps. They were at least maps of the province. Lin Xiao then turned around to look at other books and materials. In the end, she just casually flipped through them and packed them all into her space. She put the books and the bookshelf into her space. 20 minutes later, she had emptied the entire bookstore. Lin Xiao and Xiaodong walked out of the bookstore after digging out the zombie's core from its skull. Lin Xiao put the car away and stood on the side of the road with Xiaodong. She looked in a direction and walked forward. Now that they were in the city, there were a lot of zombies. There was no need to drive. It was a waste of gas and they couldn't walk fast. Moreover, Lin Xiao still needed to restrain her breath and look for higher-level zombies to kill. Lin Xiao walked more than 10 meters and arrived at the side of a building. Looking at the height, it was about 10 floors. She jumped onto the roof of an abandoned old bus in front of the building. Then she immediately turned around and jumped onto the building wall. In the blink of an eye, she was next to a window on the 6th floor. She used her claws to grab the windowsill and jumped onto the balcony. Then she jumped from the balcony again. Xiaodong looked at her nimble figure and quickly reached the top of the building. He also jumped from the roof of the bus to the balcony on the 2nd floor. But his hands and feet weren't as light and fast as Lin Xiao, so the speed of climbing up was a lot slower. Lin Xiao arrived at the top of the building and stood on the roof to smell the surrounding. In addition to a large amount of corpse stench, there was also the strange stench of zombies and all kinds of other smells. Lin Xiao didn't wait for Xiaodong to come up and jump to the next building. If she was just looking for higher-level zombies, she didn't need to smell like a dog. She only needed to use her consciousness to know if there were any higher-level zombies within 2 or 3 miles of the square garden. She smelled the smell of people and wanted to see if there were any living humans here or had been here before. This was the outer area of the city, and they just came in from the suburbs. So even though there were a lot of zombies around, it wasn't scary enough. Also, there was the smell of people. Lin Xiao sniffed. There was a very faint human scent left behind, and it was active in several places in this area. But now the people weren't here. It should be the smell that was left yesterday or the day before. Now it had moved to another place. The direction Lin Xiao was heading in was a location 2 miles away. There was the smell of a level 4 zombie there. When Xiaodong came up, he saw that Lin Xiao was already 2 or 3 buildings away from him. He hurriedly followed after her. Although he didn't know why Lin Xiao was going there, he didn't care. He just needed to follow behind her. His current level was lower than Lin Xiao. His strength couldn't catch up to Lin Xiao, and his senses couldn't catch up to Lin Xiao, so he couldn't do anything even if he wanted to. But fortunately, he met Lin Xiao before he became a zombie. If he didn't meet her, he might not be like this now. Perhaps he had completely turned into a mindless zombie. Then he would start to eat human flesh and brains like a vicious beast. Imagining himself becoming like that, Xiaodong felt that it would be better to just die. Chapter 187. 2 kilometers was not far for Lin Xiao. The area she was in was an industrial community. There were a lot of industrial areas and roads, and there were a lot of large and small factories. But the distance was not far. It was convenient for Lin Xiao and Xiaodong to jump forward. After a few minutes, Lin Xiao arrived at a building in a factory. This factory was very big. It was an electronics factory. Just looking at the factory, there were 5 or 6 buildings, and they were all large factories with more than 10 floors. On the other side was the living area. There were more than 27-story dormitory buildings. The factory area was divided into areas A to D, and the dormitory buildings were also divided into several areas. Lin Xiao stood on the edge of a factory building and looked down. There were a lot of zombies wandering in the open space below. She looked at the zombies below with some confusion. There was a level 4 zombie here, but normally there would not be low-level ordinary zombies in a place with a level 4 zombie. Then what was going on here? That level 4 zombie actually let these ordinary zombies stay here and didn't drive them out? When Lin Xiao was observing the situation below, Xiedong slowly climbed up from the other side of the building. After coming up, he saw Lin Xiao standing on the edge of the roof and looking down, not knowing what she was looking for. He walked over to her side, about a meter away, and also looked down. With one look, he understood what Lin Xiao was looking for. There were a lot of zombies below, and there were a lot of them. Xiedong looked up at those buildings and found that the zombies were on the ground outside the building. There seemed to be no zombie activity in the building. No wonder there were so many zombies below. They were all crowded together. Looking at the number of them, there was no empty space at a glance. There were at least 3,000 to 4,000 of them crowding downstairs, filling up the empty space downstairs. This was only a part of this place. The other places added up would only have more. This factory probably had no less than 30,000 people before the outbreak of the apocalypse. Xiedong knocked on the bar, and Lin Xiao turned to look at him. She saw him pointing at the middle of the other buildings, and then pointing at the zombies below. Then, he made 2 hand signs. He said that there were no zombies in the middle of the building. They were probably in the open space below. Lin Xiao nodded. She had already noticed this situation. She was just curious as to why the level 4 zombie would leave these ordinary zombies here, and there were so many of them. Level 4 zombies had no way of controlling ordinary zombies, unless it was like the spiritual type zombie she encountered when she met Du Yuanxing and the others in the south. Only then could it control some of the ordinary zombies. However, he couldn't control the number of monsters in front of him. Lin Xiao raised his head and looked in one direction. There was a dormitory a few buildings away. She pointed in that direction, then raised her hand and made a few hand signs. This meant that there was an enemy target over there, and it was a commander level 1. Xiedong was stunned for a moment. He turned his head to look in the direction she was pointing and tried to sense it again. He didn't find any targets. Thinking about it, Zhang Xian concluded that it was probably because the other party had concealed his presence too well that he was unable to detect it at all. He turned to look at Lin Xiao and pointed in that direction. Using sign language, he asked her if that was her goal for coming here. Lin Xiao nodded to him, then looked at the zombies below. She looked up and signaled to Xiedong. He told him that he was going to look for the level, for zombie first, and let him move freely. After signaling, Lin Xiao climbed the railing and jumped to the opposite building. The opposite building was also a factory building of the same height, but the distance was a bit far, about 7 or 8 meters. But Lin Xiao still easily jumped over and directly reached the top of the opposite building. When it came to Xiedong, he looked at the opposite distance. If he wanted to jump, he could only jump to the window of the opposite building. After Lin Xiao jumped over, she rolled on the ground on the roof, and her figure directly disappeared into thin air. Then a transparent figure continued to run forward. Her figure was like a transparent human, jumping from one building to another. Soon, she arrived at the roof of the dormitory building that she had pointed out to Xiedong. The dormitory building was also 7 floors, just an ordinary worker's dormitory. Lin Xiao reached the top of the building, and then directly in front of the building, she leaned on the side of the railing and looked down the corridor. There were no zombies. However, a strong smell of blood assaulted her nostrils. She had smelled it when she was with Xiedong just now. Such a strong smell of blood. How could she not smell it? Looking down, there was nothing. She directly flipped back, grabbed the side of the railing, and hung down, using the force of the flip to jump into the corridor. Gently landing on the floor of the corridor, she pressed on the hat that was loose because of the action of flipping from the top. She turned around to look at the environment next to her. It was also dirty, and there were all kinds of black blood stains on the ground and walls. The dust on the ground was very thick when she flipped down. Although her whole body was naked, there were still obvious footprints on the ground. Lin Xiao entered the corridor, walked to the stairs, and then went down one floor. From the 7th floor to the 6th floor, when she turned in the middle of the stairs, she saw the large amount of blood that was dragged up from the 5th floor. Looking at the traces of blood, it was obvious that it was directly dragged up from downstairs. Lin Xiao walked down and followed the direction of the blood. She avoided the blood stains and quietly walked over. The smell of blood on this floor was very strong. And the smell of these people was the same group of people that Lin Xiao had smelled on the roof of the bookstore. It seemed that they were caught and eaten. No wonder those people only smelled the direction they came from, but not the direction they left. And at that time, she smelled the smell of these people and the direction of the level 4 zombies. In front of her in the corridor, there was a large amount of bright red blood on the floor. The bright color was very dazzling. Now that Lin Xiao could see colors normally, she felt that the blood red color was a bit too much for her. Before, when everything was black and gray, she didn't feel much. But now she saw the familiar blood red color and the smell of blood. Combined together, it didn't feel so normal. Fortunately, Lin Xiao had long been used to this kind of bloody scene, but thinking about the scene she was about to see, her face still sank slightly. The more she followed the blood stains to the innermost room, the stronger the smell. And in addition to the smell of fresh blood, there was also the smell of decay accumulated over a long period of time. Lin Xiao, whose nose was very sensitive, felt uncomfortable and used her hand to cover her nose. In fact, on the floor of the corridor, there were already several traces of blood. Looking at the color, the dark brown below was crossed by the bright red on the surface, and the thick blood left different shades of color on the floor. Lin Xiao walked in and found that there was no clean place for her to step on. She had no choice but to avoid the fresh bloodstains and walk on the dried bloodstains. Kacha-kacha. A chewing sound came from the room, and the door was not closed, but open. Lin Xiao heard the sound and knew what the scene inside was. She forcefully closed her eyes and then walked over. Chapter 188. She walked to the door and looked inside. Sure enough, she saw that in addition to the messy table and bed, there were human limbs, half-torsos, and heads piled up everywhere in the room. The ground was full of blood, and the thick blood had flowed into a thick layer of dark red. In the corner of the room, a figure was squatting there with its back facing Lin Xiao's door. It was holding something in its hands and eating it with its head down. Kacha-kacha, the chewing sound came from its mouth. Lin Xiao saw that its back was arched, and its hair was sticky and messy. Most of the thing in its hands was exposed, and Lin Xiao could see it clearly. It was a human foot, and she could see it clearly from the calf to the sole. Obviously, the part that the zombie was eating was the middle of the thigh. Beside the zombie, there was a human torso that was broken in two. It was a young man. The man's face was covered with blood, and there was a big hole in his head. It seemed that he had been chewed. The man's eyes were wide open, and his mouth was open in pain and horror. His facial features were twisted, and his round eyes almost popped out. His body was cut off from the stomach, and his abdomen was torn into pieces. It was a bloody mess that couldn't be seen clearly. Below the waist, the other parts were thrown to the other side, and there was also a leg missing. Except for the man who seemed to be dead for less than 2 days, the other parts of the body had different lengths of time. And it seemed that this zombie had been classified. It had been a long time, and the bones and limbs that were not fresh or had been chewed were all piled up in the corner of the door. There was a strong and pungent smell of decay, and a bunch of flies were buzzing around. This pile of corpses had been around for at least 1 or 2 months, and some parts of the body that were less than 2 weeks old were scattered everywhere. Only the male corpse next to the zombie was the freshest. The zombie was focused on chewing its food, and its head and upper body were moving. It didn't notice that Lin Xiao had been standing at the door for a few seconds. Lin Xiao stood at the door for a few seconds, and then she took 2 steps back. She stood on a small piece of clean ground without blood, and suddenly appeared. Sensing Lin Xiao's sudden appearance, the zombies that were eating suddenly froze. Then, it suddenly turned around, and a strange face that Lin Xiao couldn't recognize appeared in front of him. Like most zombies, this zombie's mouth was wide open. A pair of eyes were filled with eerie darkness, and it was unknown if its nose had been bitten off by other zombies. He could only see two nostrils. When it saw Lin Xiao standing outside the door, it immediately opened its mouth and bared its teeth. Facing Lin Xiao, he let out a deep roar, woo, roar. Its voice carried a strong killing intent, as if Lin Xiao had run into its territory and would die in its hands. Lin Xiao also saw the strong killing intent in its cold black eyes. Also, because it was chewing on human flesh just now, its mouth, face, and teeth were stained with blood, and there were still some shreds of meat hanging from its teeth. Lin Xiao rolled his eyes and ignored its attack. She crossed her arms in front of her chest, then stepped back and leaned against the guardrail of the corridor, indifferently looking at the zombies. Do you think you can beat me just because you shout louder? Do you think you can roar me to death? The zombie was a little confused by Lin Xiao's calm attitude, seeing that she didn't attack at all. It didn't know how this fellow had the guts to run into its territory. Seeing that Lin Xiao didn't move, it let go of the human leg in its claws. Then it stood up and turned around. Its original appearance was no longer what it used to be. The clumps of hair that were stuck together were not very long. Although it did not cover its face, the blood stains on its face were similar to the clothes that had been soaked in blood over and over again, and its original color could not be seen. At first glance, it was bloody and dirty and smelly. This zombie had a very strong hostility, judging from the scene here. It had been hunting living people to eat, and it was a regular occurrence. The interval between the people it ate wasn't very long. Lin Xiao looked at the person it just ate, and it seemed to have died yesterday. But the previous breath disappeared a few days ago, and it seemed that it had been caught a few days ago. This zombie could still store food, and it was still alive. Its IQ was a little high. After the zombie turned around, it arched its back towards Lin Xiao, and its eyes stared at her. Its whole body began to slowly emit a layer of faint red smoke, just like Lin Xiao's. More and more red gas came out, and the color became thicker and thicker. Soon, it filled most of the space in the room. Lin Xiao didn't know what effect the red smoke had, but seeing that this zombie's ability was actually the same as hers, she looked at the red smoke with some surprise. It was rare to encounter such a strange ability. Lin Xiao saw a lot of Logia's abilities in Lu Tianyu's memory, such as metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. There were also strange ones such as metal, thunder, spirit, and so on. Lin Xiao killed one of the metal attribute a few days ago, and it was a level 5. She also killed one of the spirit attribute when she was in the south. Lin Xiao looked at the zombie that had completely changed its appearance. If it hadn't eaten too many people, she might have let it live for another 2 days. She saw that the red smoke slowly covered the zombie's figure, and the red mist was a little hard to see clearly. Lin Xiao waved his hand, and a thick black mist surged out from his palm. Moreover, it rushed towards Hong Yin in a very intelligent manner. The red smoke of this zombie didn't seem to be flexible, and it didn't listen to the zombie's command. It just drifted in the room with the flow of air. When Lin Xiao's black mist rushed out, it quickly rushed into the room, and it spread out as soon as it entered the door, forming a semicircle and covering the red smoke in the room. When the red smoke was touched by the black mist, it immediately melted away. And the speed at which the black mist advanced towards the zombie didn't stop. Roar dash, as soon as Lin Xiao released the black mist, the zombie was keenly aware of the danger. It anxiously roared at Lin Xiao. Seeing that the black mist was rushing towards it so quickly and had even melted the gas it had released, the black mist began to rush towards it. Woo-woo! The red smoke zombie growled in a low voice while slowly retreating. Lin Xiao immediately moved, and her figure disappeared on the spot. She knew that there were 2 windows behind the zombie. She could see it from its retreating movement. It wanted to run away. Lin Xiao knew the power of her black mist, but she didn't expect this zombie's perception to be so strong. It felt danger before it even touched the black mist, and its IQ wasn't low, and it seemed to want to take the opportunity to escape. Only those zombies without IQ would fearlessly rush up to attack when they saw an enemy. But the one in front of her quickly discovered that it wasn't Lin Xiao's opponent, so it wisely chose to escape. However, the enemy it encountered today was Lin Xiao. It was impossible for him to escape now. Chapter 189. As soon as Lin Xiao disappeared, the red smoke zombie panicked. It immediately jumped out of the red smoke through the window. In the next second, a transparent shadow followed behind it and leaped out. It would have been fine if the zombie didn't run, but once it ran, it exposed the back door. As soon as it turned around, Lin Xiao rushed in from outside the door. She instantly passed through the red and black smoke. Just as the red smoke zombie jumped out of the window, Lin Xiao jumped out of the window. As soon as she jumped out, her figure immediately appeared. She swung her claws at the red smoke zombie's neck. The red smoke zombie originally wanted to jump out and jump from one building to another. Because this was the dormitory area, the building behind the window was facing the back of the building. As soon as it came out, it could see the corridor and the rows of dormitory doors of the building behind it. The distance between the dormitory buildings was less than 2 meters. As a zombie, if it jumped out, it could immediately jump into the other building. However, just as it jumped out, before it could reach the corridor of the opposite building, it was cleanly slashed by Lin Xiao's claws in midair. Bang! The red smoke zombie's stiff body smashed into the corridor of the opposite building. Then, it immediately smashed into a few pieces and fell to the ground below. Roar, roar, roar! The ground floor was also crowded with zombies, and the red smoke zombie suddenly smashed down. They didn't have much of a reaction. Lin Xiao directly released her aura in midair, and then landed on a flower bed that didn't have any zombies. Roar, roar! After being hit by Lin Xiao's aura, the group of zombies that didn't have any reaction when the red smoke zombie fell to the ground immediately became chaotic. Immediately, there was a commotion, and all of them retreated to the side. In less than 10 seconds, a small empty space automatically appeared around Lin Xiao. She jumped down from the flower bed that was half a meter wide, and then walked towards the corpse of the red smoke zombie that she had cut into a few pieces with her claws. Seeing Lin Xiao's movement, the zombies in the direction that she was walking towards immediately moved away. Lin Xiao walked to the side of the red smoke zombie's corpse. The red smoke zombie's corpse had been split into several pieces. The head was separated from the neck, and the neck was connected to half of the shoulder and arm. However, the other half of the shoulder and arm had been cut off. The other half of the shoulder and arm that had been cut off was also separated from the lower part of the chest. Several scattered pieces fell to the ground. Lin Xiao walked in front of the zombie's head, squatted down, and used his claws to cut open the head. Then, he used his fingernails to pry open the skull and dug out the corpse core. When she passed through the zombie's red mist, she felt something. There was a light, sweet aroma in the red mist, making her have a slight impulse to indulge in it. Now that she thought about it, she understood what it felt like to be in the red mist. It was confusion. Moreover, this zombie's attack power was actually very low. It didn't even have the slightest resistance against his attack and was easily cut into several pieces. It seemed that the reason it kept the zombies below was to protect itself. He just didn't expect Lin Xiao to jump over from the top of the building, and the other zombies didn't notice. At this time, Xiedong also came over. He walked to Lin Xiao's side and looked down at her. Lin Xiao looked at the corpse core in her hand. There was nothing special about the energy inside. She directly threw it into the lake in the space. She stood up and walked out. Xiedong also followed her out. After walking for about 10 or 20 meters, Lin Xiao walked to the side of a relatively tall factory building. She stopped, turned around, and made a gesture to Xiedong, asking him to wait for her there. She went up to check the direction. Xiedong looked up at the top of the building and nodded. Lin Xiao walked to the side of the building, where there were rows of air conditioning boxes, and quickly climbed up. In less than 10 seconds, she quickly reached the top of the building. When she reached the top, she found the highest position and climbed up. Standing there, she faced the sky and sniffed around. After sniffing for a long time, she finally smelled something. Huh! Lin Xiao looked in a certain direction in confusion. She faintly felt that there was something in that direction, but it might be because the distance was too far, so she couldn't feel it clearly. She couldn't smell anything, it was too far away. But in her heart, she faintly felt a strange connection with the other side. She didn't know what was going on. She sniffed in other directions, but didn't find any high-level zombies. Looking at the place that gave her the strange feeling, Lin Xiao decided to go there to take a look. Anyway, That direction was in the direction of the city. Lin Xiao turned around and jumped down from the top of the building. Then she directly jumped down from the position she just came up from. He somersaulted twice in the air before landing steadily on the ground. Xiaodong stood at the side and watched her come down before walking over. Lin Xiao looked up at the sun. It was already noon. It was very hot. She walked out of the factory while taking off her coat. She revealed the military vest inside. Although she wasn't sweating, she could feel the heat. Although she would be exposed to the sun if her arms and shoulders were exposed, she would rather be exposed to the wind than her skin wrapped in clothes. As soon as she took off her clothes, Xiaodong was stunned for a moment and then stared at her. Moreover, he was walking beside her. When he turned his head to look, he saw that she was standing beside him. When he turned his head, he saw the two big cats in front of Lin Xiao's chest. Well, although she was wrapped in a military vest, it still couldn't support her body shape. Lin Xiao was wrapping the two sleeves around her waist and was about to tie a knot when she noticed his gaze. She looked up and saw that he was staring at her chest. She looked down. Okay. She forgot to find her underwear. Now, she was wearing a tight-fitting singlet, which tightly wrapped around her two big weapons, and the shape of them was completely revealed. There were two more dots. She silently picked up the clothes that she was going to tie to her waist and then draped it over her shoulders. She tied a knot and moved the knot of the sleeves to the back and moved the fabric of the clothes to the front of her chest. This way, it blocked the bulge in front of her chest. After she was done, she looked up and saw that Xiaodong was still staring at her chest. She immediately lifted her leg and kicked him. Xiaodong was kicked and staggered 2 steps to the side before coming back to his senses. He then realized how, awkward his expression was just now. He touched his nose and looked at Lin Xiao under the hat and glasses, so he couldn't see her eyes. His mind was still full of what he saw just now. That shape, that scale. He really wanted to touch it. Xiaodong tried hard to kick this thought away, then smiled awkwardly and gave her a thumbs up. Lin Xiao was originally close to him, so of course she could feel what he was thinking. She saw that he was thinking about rubbing her chest with his hands and still dared to give her a thumbs up. She silently lifted her leg. Seeing that she lifted her leg again, Xiaodong cleverly took a few steps to the side. Looking again, he found that the skin on Lin Xiao's shoulders and arms were white and tender, although it didn't have a ruddy luster. But the smooth luster was also very beautiful, and there were almost no flaws on it. Chapter 190. Although Xiaodong looked at it enviously and ate 2 mouthfuls of ice cream, he didn't dare to touch it. However, he didn't dare to touch her. It was obvious that he was looking for a beating. Lin Xiao turned her head and continued to walk forward. The zombies on the way automatically gave way when she was within 5 meters. After leaving the factory's gate, Lin Xiao let go of the car. Then she sat in the front passenger seat with full force. Xiaodong consciously sat in the driver's seat, started the car, and then turned to look at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao raised her hand and pointed in the direction that gave her a strange feeling, then patted the front. Xiaodong knew that she meant for him to speed up a little, so he nodded, stepped on the gas, and drove out. Along the way, Lin Xiao directly pointed him in the direction. Until an hour later, Lin Xiao's expression changed. The electronics factory they were in before was on the outskirts of the Westlake district. Now they had passed through the entire Westlake district and entered the upper city. Hangzhou's upper and lower city were both in the city center. The population was also very dense. Arriving here, Lin Xiao's feeling was very clear. Even Xiaodong himself felt a few oppressive breaths, which completely suppressed his own breath. After parking the car on the side of the road, he looked at the large number of ordinary zombies wandering in front of the car. Those zombies also turned their heads to look at them. The various zombies' faces also had a trace of doubt. Xiaodong turned his head to look at Lin Xiao. At this time, Lin Xiao opened the door and walked out. She had already restrained her breath on the way, so that she was similar to ordinary zombies. So when they arrived here, the road was blocked by these zombies. After waiting for Xiaodong to come down, Lin Xiao put away the car. At a glance, there were hundreds of thousands of zombies around. They were all waiting at the end of the street, like an old man walking quickly, swaying blindly as they walked. After Lin Xiao restrained her breath, they would no longer avoid her. However, Xiedong's breath made these zombies a little concerned, but not to the extent of avoiding her. She stood in the same place and looked left and right, then ran towards the building next to her. Then she quickly jumped up and quickly climbed up from the outside of the building like a monkey. Xiedong saw her actions and quickly followed her, climbing up the wall outside the building. Although he didn't know what Lin Xiao was going to do, this speed was several times faster than running up the stairs. Lin Xiao stood on the rooftop. There were tall buildings everywhere, and the one she climbed was more than 20 stories high. The higher one stood, the farther one could see, and the situation in the distance could be seen clearly. She walked to the edge of the roof and sniffed the air. At the same time, she sensed the level of these high-level zombies and the degree of suppression they had on her. Because the distance was much closer than before, she could feel it more clearly. Moreover, the direction that she had always felt strange was the only direction where she could sense the aura of a living person. Moreover, it was a group of living people. There were more than a dozen living people over there, and there were even a few level 5 zombies around them. What was going on? From that position, it seemed to be very close to the central area. The strength of these people was not very high, at most 2 level 5 metahumans and a few level 3 and 4 metahumans. Look at the number of zombies here. How did they get in? Moreover, this group of people actually had 3 level 5 zombie leaders around them. Unexpectedly did not eat them. Lin Xiao carefully sensed the movement over there, but it was about 10 kilometers away. Her perception of the situation here was not clear, and she only knew that the group of people was together with a few zombie leaders. Why would those people be together with such dangerous zombies? Lin Xiao did not understand what was going on, and the situation she sensed now was not in line with the normal situation of this apocalypse. Xiedong climbed up and saw that Lin Xiao was looking in a direction for a long time without saying anything, so he walked over. Looking down from the top, he saw that the ground in front of the building was full of zombies, and there were also zombies moving around in the building. He looked at Lin Xiao and saw that Lin Xiao's face under the hat was still quietly looking in that direction, not knowing what she was thinking. But he did not sense anything over there, and he did not know what Lin Xiao sensed. Lin Xiao thought about it, and decided to directly rush over to those people to find out what was going on. The strange feeling in her heart made her feel a little strange. Thinking about it, she made a sneaking gesture to Xiedong, and pointed in the direction where the smell of those people was coming from. After Lin Xiao finished making the gesture, she took a step back, and then with one foot, she jumped to the top of the opposite building. As soon as she leaped out, her figure suddenly disappeared in midair, as if she had jumped into another dimension. In fact, even Xiedong did not know how Lin shouted it, but this skill was too powerful. Directly stealth, sneak attack is the best. But he had seen many scenes of Lin Xiao directly disappearing for a while, and then appearing in another place. But he did not see that after Lin Xiao disappeared, she became a transparent shadow. Lin Xiao quickly jumped from the top of the building to the next building, and then ran forward at full speed, and then continued to jump to the next building. Xiedong knew that his speed could not keep up with her, and he did not know where Lin Xiao went after stealth. He could only continue to move in the direction that Lin Xiao gave him. Lin Xiao quickly ran and jumped on the top of the building. The height of the building was different, the distance was different, but she directly jumped over it. If it was too far, it was more than 15 meters, she directly jumped to the top of the green trees on the side of the road, and then jumped on the protruding branches. The more she got closer, the more uneasy the strange feeling in her heart became. The 3 zombie leaders were directly ignored by her, and she only wanted to know what was going on with that group of people. She did not recognize the smell, but there was a faint feeling that she could not ignore these people. Half an hour later, Lin Xiao arrived at the place where that group of people were staying. It was very strange. These people were walking on the road. Lin Xiao lay on the top of a tall building and looked down at the dozens of people gathered on the road and walked forward. And there were many ordinary zombies around them. All of them had their mouths wide open, and it was unknown whether it was blood or saliva, but they slowly followed the group of people all the way forward. But this group of zombies formed a circle around the dozen people, and they did not dare to approach within 2 meters of them. The reason why this group of people obediently walked forward was because there were 3 zombies staring at them, one in front, one in the back, and one in the middle. The one in front was obviously leading the way, and the one in the middle was constantly driving the ordinary zombies to the side. The last one was to prevent this group of people from escaping. Lin Xiao looked at the 3 level 5 zombie leaders, and from their appearance and clothes, she could not see their original appearance. Whether they were male or female, young or old, she also could not see, because their faces were all badly mutilated, and their big mouth had a row of sharp teeth, and their protruding eyes were pitch black without any white. If this was before the end of the world, it could directly scare a bunch of people to death. Chapter 191. Lin Xiao looked at them for a while, then moved a few meters in front of the group of people, and then jumped down from the top of the building. Hiding in the group of zombies, she retracted her aura and squeezed in the direction of the group of people. When she got closer, she realized that she actually knew the 2 people in front of them. Oh, wrong. It wasn't she who knew them, it was Lu Tianyu who knew them. Looking at the 2 faces, even though they were covered in dust, they were still very handsome and beautiful young faces. Lin Xiao silently said in her heart, how could it be such a coincidence? Was this fate? One of these 2 faces belonged to someone Lu Tianyu was very familiar with. It was her younger brother. When Lin Xiao looked at Lu Tianyu's memory before, there was indeed an impression of a younger brother. Although Lu Tianyu's memory was very messy, now she saw that face. Lin Xiao still remembered. This was Lu Tianyu's younger brother from different mothers. Because she always felt that her stepmother was the murderer who destroyed their family, she didn't like this younger brother of hers. The 2 of them had always been at odds since they were young. After the apocalypse, Lu Tianyu didn't want to have anything to do with this younger brother. In the base, they basically pretended not to know each other. Lu Tianyu, why was he here? And now the situation of these people. Were they caught by zombies? Lin Xiao followed the zombies next to her, and followed Lu Tianyu and the others forward. There was also another familiar face, which was Kong Qingming next to Lu Tianyu. Kong Qingming was Lu Tianyu's good friend, and he often came to the Lu family in the past, so Lu Tianyu was no stranger to him. But looking at the appearance of the 3 level 5 zombie leaders, where were they going to take them? Lin Xiao knew that with her current strength, it was more than enough to deal with 1 zombie leader. Against 2, she could still win. He could still win against 3 of them, because she had the black mist. Lin Xiao quietly released a faint black mist from her hand, using her consciousness to control it to separate into 3 strands and float towards the 3 zombie leaders, while walking towards Lu Tianyu and Lu Tianyu, who were walking at the front. Where are these zombies going to take us? I don't know. It's strange. They don't eat us. You seem very happy. Even if they don't eat us now, do you think they won't eat us when we get there? Haha, we're really unlucky this time. When Lin Xiao leaned over, he happened to hear the conversation between Lu Tianyu and Kong Qingming. The 2 of them had now grown into rare handsome men. Although their faces were covered in wounds, blood, dust, and mud, it was still a rare sight. However, it wasn't hard to tell that the 2 of them had outstanding looks. Hearing Kong Qingming say that he was in big trouble this time, Lu Tianyu's eyes immediately flashed with hatred. He gritted his teeth and said, damn it! If I can make it back alive this time, I'll definitely exterminate that despicable Wu Yueyun. He actually led a level 5 zombie to our side and ran away. Kong Qingming looked ahead as he walked and said weakly, forget it. Do you think we can go back alive? Perhaps I'm dreaming before I die. His eyes had already lost their luster, and he walked forward with a numb expression. The further he went, the closer he felt he was to death. Although he didn't know why these zombies just followed them and drove them forward, they didn't immediately swarm and bite them. Hearing Kong Qingming's words, the hatred in Lu Tianyu's eyes faded, and he lowered his head. At this time, Lin Xiao was mixed in with the group of zombies. Although these zombies were covered in blood and dirt, she was a clean zombie. There was still a big difference between these ordinary zombies and the group of ordinary zombies. But who asked these zombies to not care about this? Although she couldn't sense the thoughts of the 3 level 5 zombies, she could sense the thoughts of the zombies around her. Food. Can't eat. Leader. Food. Food. 4. Leader. Food. Can't. Eat. Wanna eat. Can't. Ordinary zombies' thoughts were very simple, But Lin Xiao still received a key message. Leader? What did that mean? Is this leader a level 3 zombie leader? Could it be that these 3 zombie leaders were the overlords of this area? So the zombies didn't dare to eat the food they identified? Very likely. A level 5 zombie leader was like a king in the animal world. Like a wolf king or a lion king, they had their own status and rules. While Lin Xiao was thinking, she secretly turned the black mist into a few strands of black gas and flew towards the 3 level 5 zombies. These 3 zombie leaders had very keen senses. When Lin Xiao's black gas was just 1 meter away from them, they immediately noticed it. Roar! The last one suddenly let out a low roar and stopped. As it roared, the other zombies also stopped, and they all vigilantly looked around. Especially the 3 zombie leaders, their eyes were very sharp as they stared at their surroundings. They immediately saw the black gas. Seeing the black gas coming towards them, one of them reacted quickly and waved his hand. A small wind blew up from the ground. Lin Xiao's black gas was instantly washed away. Lin Xiao's black gas was blown away by the wind and lost control. But soon she found that although the black gas was washed away, it didn't disappear. The black gas became very thin and flew towards the surrounding zombies. Soon it stuck to these ordinary zombies. Then, he quickly created one pit after another on their bodies. The ordinary zombies didn't care about the holes on their bodies, and soon their limbs were broken. They didn't seem to take it seriously. But when the 3 level 5 zombies saw their situation, they immediately screamed. Roar! The zombie leader roared, and the surrounding ordinary zombies immediately went crazy. Roar, 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 roar. Looking at the group of zombies that started to run crazily, Lin Xiao immediately went invisible. Then, he reacted quickly and dodged into the inner circle. Even if the ordinary zombies were to run around crazily, they still couldn't reach the 3 zombie leaders. The humans, who were confused by the sudden situation, looked at the rampaging zombies in confusion. Looking at the 3 motionless level 5 zombies that were guarding them, they didn't know what was going on. At this time, Lin Xiao quietly approached Lu Tianyu and Kong Qingming. Although she wanted to kill the 3 zombie leaders first, she had to consider the group of humans who had lost their fighting strength. She'd better put them into the space one by one first. Perhaps with some selfish thoughts, Lin Xiao went to Lu Tianyu and Kong Qingming first. She was different from Lu Tianyu. She also had a younger brother and sister. Although Lu Tianyu didn't like Lu Tianyi in his heart and could even do nothing to save him, she, Lin Xiao, couldn't do it. Since she had met him, she had to save him. Chapter 192. The 3 level 5 zombies seemed to be different from the other level 5 zombies. Not only could they gather together peacefully, they didn't start killing each other as soon as they saw each other like other high-level zombies. Moreover, these 3 zombies could work together as a team. Looking at one tightly guarding this group of people, the other 2 were nervously and vigilantly searching outside. It seemed that if an enemy appeared, it would only be those 2. There was still one left to keep an eye on the prey, to prevent them from running away or being rescued. This kind of action was already close to the combat intelligence of human beings. Lin Xiao increasingly felt that these 3 zombie leaders were not simple. She became more alert as well. She silently and invisibly walked in front of Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming. Fortunately, these 2 people were staying together. Lin Xiao stretched out her 2 hands and gently pressed on their shoulders. And, at the same time, Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming had just noticed something and turned their heads to look at Lin Xiao's shoulder. Suddenly a figure flashed in front of them, and then before they could clearly see who it was, their eyes suddenly blurred. Then in the blink of an eye, they found that the scene in front of them had changed. Looking at the clear lake in front of them, Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming were already dumbfounded. Qingming, am I seeing things? I think it should be illusion? And I think so too. You say, could it be that when we close our eyes again, we went back to where we were just now? Maybe. Then the 2 people turned their heads to look at the surrounding environment in a daze. Outside, Lin Xiao put the 2 people in, and she immediately flashed out. Then she quickly reached out and pressed on the 2 men standing behind Lu Tianyi and the others. Then they disappeared together again. Lin Xiao's movements were very fast, until she put in the third group of people. The zombie that was guarding Lu Tianyi and the others finally reacted. Roar dash, it immediately roared, and when Lin Xiao appeared for the fourth time to grab the other two people, it rushed towards Lin Xiao. Although its reaction was very fast, and its movements were also very fast. However, Lin Xiao's movements were much faster than the zombie. Before the zombie could even reach him, Lin Xiao had already killed the zombie. Before this zombie rushed to her side, she quickly pressed down the two people and then flashed again. Within a few seconds, she had thrown 7 or 8 people into the space. After Little Man helped her repair and upgrade this time, her movement speed was 2 levels faster than before. Therefore, no one, including the zombie guarding the prey, could see her figure clearly. All they saw was a military green figure flash by. After Lin Xiao threw the 8 people into the space, he didn't care about their dumbfounded expressions as he continued to sneak out of the space. The zombie pounced on empty air and roared furiously. Roar! It stood at the place where Lin Xiao had disappeared like a madman. It looked up and down, left and right, and its gaze quickly swept across the surroundings a few times. But no matter how it looked, it could not find the military green figure from before. The other 2 zombies that were attracted by the 2 roars turned their heads back, and when they turned their heads back, they obviously found that their prey had decreased in number. Although they didn't know how many people were missing, they didn't know how many people they originally had. But they knew very little. It couldn't be helped. Who asked them to have a higher IQ? But they didn't learn mathematics. Lin Xiao looked at their reaction and found that even though the 3 of them were furious, they still didn't look like they wanted to do anything to these living people. She was afraid that her action would anger these 3 zombies. In a fit of anger, they directly attacked and killed the person to settle the matter. Now that she had already saved half of the people, she still didn't have the intention to do anything. But the 3 zombie leaders had driven the remaining people into a pile, and the 3 of them were tightly guarding the periphery. Lin Xiao looked at the remaining 5 people and quietly walked over. He carefully stood in the gap between the 2 zombies and then put one hand inside. She grabbed a person's clothes and directly flashed away. At this moment, because she couldn't put both hands in, the probability of touching the zombie leader was too high. Lin Xiao approached them and directly stole a person from their hands. The 2 zombies reacted very quickly. When they saw Lin Xiao flashed away, they suddenly turned around and grabbed her. But their 4 claws still caught nothing. And Lin Xiao put this person into her space and immediately flashed away. Then, just as the 2 hands missed their target, he grabbed another person from the side and disappeared again. Roar, 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 roar. The 3 zombie leaders were already flustered and angry because their prey kept disappearing. They immediately formed a hurricane around them, and then a big fire started burning. Wind and fire mixed together, quickly forming a fire tornado of wind and fire. It was more than 10 meters high and enveloped the 3 zombies and the last 3 people. When Lin Xiao saw such a cool skill, she stood at the side and couldn't help but praise. But she was worried in the next second. Seeing that the 3 people in the fire tornado had already started to call for help, she temporarily couldn't use the previous method to save people. Help! Don't leave us behind. Which expert is it? Please save us. Save me. And me. And me. Save me. Please. Don't leave us behind. Seeing their comrades suddenly disappear with a shadow, the 3 people instinctively felt that someone was coming to save them. But they didn't expect that before the other person could save them, they would be stopped by these 3 level 5 zombies. Lin Xiao looked at the 3 people and 3 zombies in the fire tornado, and then looked around. Because of the rage of the level 5 zombies, the dense group of ordinary zombies that surrounded them all disappeared. Obviously, they were all scared away and ran into the nearby alleys and corridors. This area immediately became empty. They ran quite fast. Lin Xiao looked around and found that Xie Dong was standing behind a wall not far away, looking at her. She immediately made a gesture to him, telling him to stay where he was and not move. Lin Xiao turned around and walked towards the fire tornado. She circled around the tornado and found that there was temporarily no way to go in and save the 3 people. Even if she was invisible, she still had a physical existence. She reckoned that if she went in like this, she would be burned. Looking at the nearby buildings, they weren't as high as the fire, and she couldn't jump in from the building. The three people shouted for a while, and then despaired. Because with their current size, unless they killed these three zombie leaders, they wouldn't be able to save them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to save them. But who had the ability to kill three zombie leaders at once? A rank 6 metahuman might not even be able to win against a rank 5 zombie leader. Unless the person who had just rescued their comrade was a level 7 base leader, they wouldn't be able to do so. Thinking about it, it was impossible. Haiqing base only had 3 leaders. Big shots like them wouldn't specially come to save them. Chapter 193. Everyone in Lin Xiao's space was looking at each other in silence. Yes, because they hadn't realized what was going on. There was someone with a quick reaction who saw Lu Tianyi next to him and immediately asked, "Captain, this is the special ability space?" Looking at the lake, looking at the grass, looking at the high-end furniture that was neatly placed on the side, and the stove next to their feet. At this time, Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming, who came in first, had carefully observed the space twice. Hearing the team member's question, he answered hesitantly, "I think it should be. But did you see the person who brought you in?" The others shook their heads. Kong Qingming said, "He was too fast. I only noticed an army green shadow. Fortunately, he continued to bring people in a few more times. Only then did I see that he was wearing camouflage clothes." As soon as he finished speaking, the others looked at him. He could actually take us into the space without a sound. Those zombie leaders didn't even have time to react. How did he do it? Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming looked at each other. Kong Qingming replied, "We also want to know how he did it." As he said that, he looked at the number of people and suddenly said, "There are still 3 people who haven't come in." As soon as he said that, the others looked around and found that there were indeed only 10 people here. They were still missing 3 people. The last 2 who came in said, "I think that person shouldn't be able to save the 3 of them. Because before we came in, the 3 zombie leaders were already very nervous. Seeing the 2 of us disappear directly in their hands, it may have stimulated them. Maybe they have already used their ultimate move." Lu Tianyi's eyes kept tracing the lake in front of him, and then turned to look at the grass. Suddenly, his eyes froze as if he saw something strange. Then he turned and lifted his feet to walk in the direction of the grass. Seeing Lu Tianyi walking, the others naturally followed. After Lu Tianyi walked over, he was sure what he saw. This is mutated strawberry? A cabbage? Lettuce? Look, those big pumpkins. They are all mutated. And potatoes, such a big pile. What are they used for? It must have mutated. Looking at the vibrant strawberries and vegetables in Lin Xiao's space, as well as the untouched pumpkins and potatoes, Lu Tianyi and the others were puzzled. At this moment, a small gray shadow suddenly jumped out from the strawberry field. It jumped into the bushes and disappeared without a trace. If I'm not wrong, that should be a rabbit. You're not mistaken. I saw it too. Everyone was dumbfounded as they watched the little rabbit disappear. Some of them stood at the side of the strawberry field and stared blankly. Outside, Lin Xiao stood 5 meters away from the fire tornado. She felt hot just by getting a little closer. Therefore, he could only stay a little further away. Seeing that the 3 of them were not going to kill the 3 people immediately, Lin Xiao thought for a moment and decided to show himself. Roar dash! As soon as she appeared, the 3 zombies roared at her. One of them immediately jumped out of the ring of fire and pounced towards her. Lin Xiao looked at the zombie pouncing towards her with flames all over its body. Its speed wasn't considered fast in her eyes. She calmly stood in place and waited for the zombie to pounce in front of her. She suddenly dodged and moved to the side of its body. Then, she raised her hand and slapped down with her claw. Bang dash! This flame zombie didn't expect Lin Xiao, who didn't feel threatened at all, to be able to easily dodge its attack. Moreover, as soon as she turned around, she slapped its back. After Lin Xiao slapped it, she didn't stop her movements. She hooked her hand back and slashed out with her claw. Puff dash! It was just a collision. This flame zombie quickly fell to the ground with a bang, and the flames on its body instantly extinguished. But Lin Xiao's movements didn't stop just like that. She casually waved her hand. A thick cloud of black smoke gushed out. It was no longer a wisp of smoke like before. The black smoke covered the corpse of the zombie on the ground and rolled it up. In an instant, the ground was clean. The corpse of the zombie that was lying on the ground a second ago was now gone. Only a head was left on the ground. Lin Xiao then waved her hand in the direction of the fire tornado. The rolling black smoke in front of her immediately rolled towards that direction. After the flame zombie died, the flames on the other side of the fire tornado also slowly dissipated. Soon, only the rotating hurricane was left. The two zombies that were guarding the three human prey saw Lin Xiao's black smoke gushing out, and they showed a rare look of fear. Their bodies were getting lower and lower. The roar that was originally directed at Lin Xiao in their throats also slowly became softer. It turned into a low whine. Now that there was no fire, Lin Xiao followed the approach of the black smoke. After hearing the two level 5 zombies see the black smoke, they began to retreat with their consciousness. Lin Xiao was still very vigilant in her heart. Although she felt that these two zombies should be preparing to abandon their prey and escape, she let them escape. But she still had to prevent them from killing the three people when they escaped. Lin Xiao increased the density of the black mist. The thick black mist melted everything within a 10-meter radius around him. The asphalt road under her feet and the stones on the ground, the old cars piled up around them, the grass trees and lampposts on the side of the road. After being swept by the black smoke, they were all quickly decomposed and melted. The black smoke was a kind of energy. When Lin Xiao opened her eyes, she saw that the black smoke energy was purple and had a strange luster. When she opened her eyes, she only saw thick black. Her control of the black smoke was actually just controlling the energy. The area of the black mist slowly expanded and then gradually pressed towards the two zombies' tornadoes. Seeing that the black smoke was getting closer and the area was getting bigger and bigger, the two zombies finally couldn't endure it anymore. With a howl, they actually turned around and ran. They ran? Suddenly, she saw that the two zombies that were originally baring their fangs and brandishing their claws were instantly taken care of, and the other two were actually scared away. The three people who suddenly became safe from danger looked at each other in a daze. Seeing that the two zombies turned around and ran, Lin Xiao calmly withdrew the black smoke. From the moment she released the black smoke, she felt that these two zombies were very afraid. So she just controlled the black smoke to slowly approach them, using this slow speed to increase their psychological activity. The result was very obvious. These two only had the intelligence of an ordinary 6 or 7-year-old child. In the face of a threat, they would choose to run away in fear. Because of this, Lin Xiao enlarged the black smoke and then slowly pressed towards the other side. Then these two zombies couldn't bear the pressure, and they turned around and ran away without even taking their prey. Chapter 194. After Lin Xiao retracted the black mist, the surroundings became empty. Looking at the road that suddenly became empty, all the cars, rocks, trees, and flowers that the black mist passed through were gone, and even the ground had sunk in. It was as if a layer of land had been peeled off. Lin Xiao stood opposite and looked at the three men with dumbfounded expressions, then looked around. Only then did he signal Xiedong, who was in the corner, to come out. After Xiedong came out, he walked towards Lin Xiao. "Hey, isn't that Xiedong from Area C? He seems to have been missing for a long time." After seeing Xiedong come out from afar, one of the three people actually recognized him. Xiedong's ears twitched, and when he walked to Lin Xiao's side, he looked at them. He had just recognized one of them. Previously, when they were out on a mission, they had worked together once. But it had been a long time, and they had not contacted each other after that, because the living area they lived in was not in the same area. This person was called Huang Shou, about 25 years old. He was a rank 3 Earth ability user, but he should have no energy now. Xiedong lived in Area C on the outskirts of C City Base, and Huang Shou lived in Area A. Lin Xiao brought Xiedong in front of the three people, and then he simply sized them up. Huang Shou and the other two looked at Lin Xiao gratefully, only to realize that Lin Xiao was a woman. Although she was wearing a hat and sunglasses, her slender waist and slender white arms could not be seen. Although she had a camouflage jacket tied to her shoulders, and the fabric of the jacket covered her chest, The curve could not be covered. She wore loose military camouflage pants and a pair of military boots. She was dressed very militarily, but she did not have any weapons on her. This must be an expert. At this level, unless it was a heavy weapon, it would be useless. After seeing Lin Xiao's appearance, Huang Shou quickly turned his gaze to Xiedong and said with slight excitement, "I didn't expect it to be you, Xiedong. Why did you come to Zombie City? And this is?" He knew that Xiedong and this woman had not appeared here to save them. This time, they were just passing by to save them. Xiedong nodded to Huang Shou, then pointed to his throat and waved his hand. Huang Shou looked at his movements strangely and asked in confusion, "What's wrong with your throat? Can't you speak?" Xiedong nodded to him again. Lin Xiao turned around and walked in front of the zombie's head. She squatted down and used her hand to draw out a wisp of black smoke and swirled it around the head. The black smoke slowly revolved around the zombie's head and quickly dissolved it, leaving behind a flickering zombie core. After Huang Shou greeted Xiedong, he immediately approached Xiedong. Then he glanced at Lin Xiao and asked him, "Who is she?" Her black smoke seemed to be very powerful. Even the zombie leader was scared away. This was probably no lower than a level 6 arcana. There doesn't seem to be such a person in our base. Where did she come from? Xiedong glanced at him before taking out a small notebook and a pen from his pants pocket. He then wrote a sentence for him to read. "Ask her yourself." They didn't know that Lin Xiao was a zombie, so Xiedong wouldn't tell them. Xiedong didn't know how to introduce Lin Xiao. He might as well let Huang Shou ask her himself. "You want me to ask her myself?" So mysterious. Right. Where did she take our team leaders? Huang Shou was stunned when he saw Xiedong's words. Then he suddenly remembered that the others were missing. At this time, Lin Xiao had already picked up the zombie core and disappeared in a flash. Huang Shou, who was originally thinking about how to greet Lin Xiao, suddenly saw that Lin Xiao had disappeared again. Only then did he think of something and quickly turned to ask Xiedong. She disappeared. When we were saving them just now, we didn't see her figure, so she directly disappeared. What's going on? Is she also a space arcanist? Xiedong looked at him and nodded, but didn't say anything. At this time, suddenly, a figure flashed at the place where Lin Xiao had just disappeared, and 3 figures appeared. Then the next second, one of them immediately disappeared. Seeing the sudden appearance of the people, Huang Shou immediately shouted with joy, "Captain! Vice Captain!" Then the 3 of them immediately went over to Lu Tianyi and the other man who had just been sent out by Lin Xiao. "Oh, that's great. The 3 of you are fine." Lu Tianyi saw that Huang Shou and the other 2 were still alive and standing in front of him, and immediately became happy. Huang Shou nodded to him, took a deep breath, blinked his eyes, and said with the emotion of surviving a disaster, "I almost thought we were all going to die here today." Lu Tianyi also breathed a sigh of relief and said, "It's good that everyone is fine." At this time, another 2 people were sent out of the space by Lin Xiao. Lu Tianyi immediately turned his head and saw a slim military green figure send people out, and the next second, she disappeared again. It was too fast, and he couldn't see the person clearly. Seeing his own people being sent out one after another, Huang Shou didn't say anything. Together with Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming, they watched the person send people out again and again. Lin Xiao had to send the people out 3 times before they were all sent out. Finally, her figure flashed, and she stood 2 meters away from Lu Tianyi and looked at him. Only then did Lu Tianyi see Lin Xiao's appearance clearly, but he quickly frowned and stared at Lin Xiao's face under the hat in silence. Xiedong silently stood behind Lin Xiao. Seeing Lu Tianyi's eyes, he guessed that Lu Tianyi might have recognized that Lin Xiao was Lu Tianyu. But looking at his expression, it was hard to tell if he couldn't believe it or was not sure. "Hey, we're out. Where are the 3 zombie leaders? Hey, this is still where we were just now. But what's going on with the ground?" "Boss." The others were suddenly pulled out by Lin Xiao, and they quickly reacted. They immediately looked around and were alert. After confirming that there was no danger, they breathed a sigh of relief. Then they all saw Lin Xiao and Xiedong standing opposite them. Huang Shou leaned over to Kong Qingming's ear and whispered, "Vice Captain, she saved us. Did you enter her space just now?" Kong Qingming nodded to him and looked at Lu Tianyi's appearance. He didn't make a sound. The others also noticed that Lu Tianyi was frowning and staring at Lin Xiao, and they felt that this wasn't very good. After all, Lin Xiao had just rescued them from the zombies. At this time, Lu Tianyi suddenly put away his expression and then said to Lin Xiao with a grateful smile, "You saved us this time. Let's not talk about anything else. Everyone in our team owes you a life this time. If you need anything, just tell us. I'm Lu Tianyi, the captain of Haiqing Base's Agricultural Division 3. I don't know your name. Yes, this time we all owe you a life. If you need it in the future, we will definitely return it." When the others heard Lu Tianyi's words, they immediately opened their mouths to echo. Chapter 195. Lin Xiao looked at them and didn't say anything. The eyes under her eyes were calm, quietly looking at Lu Tianyi and the others. She could feel their sincere gratitude, but she also felt the doubts of Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming. After thinking about it, she slightly raised her head and revealed her face. Sure enough, Lin Xiao looked up. After the whole face was revealed, Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming's expressions changed. The others didn't have any reaction. The smile on Lu Tianyi's face slightly stiffened and then disappeared in an instant. His eyes widened and his pupils shrank. He raised his hand and pointed at Lin Xiao, but didn't say anything. The others saw Lu Tianyi's reaction and showed a strange expression. "What's wrong, boss? Do you know this, beauty?" Huang Shou looked at Lin Xiao's face, that delicate chin and beautiful lips. She should be a beauty. He really wanted to see what her eyes looked like. At this time, Kong Qingming raised his hand and pressed down Lu Tianyi's hand, saying in his ear, "Calm down, maybe it's just a look." Seeing Kong Qingming's action, Huang Shou and the others were even more confused. Lu Tianyi took a deep breath, calmed his emotions, and then nodded. "Don't forget, she doesn't have an ability." Kong Qingming let go of his hand and reminded him. "I know." Lu Tianyi nodded and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes had calmed down. But even if Kong Qingming said so, he was clear in his heart. In fact, he didn't see wrong. Of course, he was very familiar with this face. Whether it was heavy makeup or not, he could recognize it at a glance. The hat with sunglasses couldn't cover it at all. But what Kong Qingming said was right. That person didn't have an ability. But the person in front of him had space. That person wouldn't save him, and it was even more impossible for her to come all the way to such a dangerous and terrible zombie. So it could only be said that the person in front of him just happened to pass by and save them. She wasn't her. But at least they grew up together. How could he recognize the wrong person? Lu Tianyi didn't know because his own emotions were fluctuating too much. Lin Xiao, who stood less than 2 meters away, could actually sense what he was thinking. Kong Qingming was his best friend, and they had been good brothers for so many years. Of course, he knew Lu Tianyi's current state and his thoughts. He sighed to himself and didn't say anything else. She just followed him to look at Lin Xiao. At this time, Huang Shou suddenly asked a question. "Sister, since you don't want to tell me how to address you, I'll just call you that. There's a question I'm not sure if I can ask you." Lin Xiao glanced at Huang Shou. Seeing that he was in his 20s, there was nothing wrong with calling her sister, so she nodded. Lu Tianyi, Kong Qingming, and the others immediately glanced at Huang Shou. Huang Shou gulped, then carefully asked, "May I ask if you're a dual ability user?" As soon as these words came out, the expressions of the people on their side immediately changed. He stared at Lin Xiao. Even Lu Tianyi was stunned for a moment before staring at Lin Xiao. It seemed as if they wouldn't give up until Lin Xiao answered. Apart from Huang Shou's group of 3, no one else had seen Lin Xiao use the Black Mist ability. When they suddenly heard Huang Shou's question, they were all shocked. Because dual ability users were considered heresy. In the post-apocalyptic world, dual ability users were very rare talents. At least in the millions of people in Sea City Base, there was only one dual ability user, and it was a natural life ability user. The dual ability user was an old man, but because of the evolution of his water and wood abilities after the apocalypse, his body functions had recovered a lot. Although he was already in his 70s, he looked no different from a person in his 50s. This was very normal. Basically, after the apocalypse, ability users were stronger and healthier than ordinary people, and the speed of aging was greatly reduced. In other words, These ability users, apart from the changes in their aura and skills, did not change much in their appearance. And the people in Sea City base knew that this dual ability old man was an important person in the base. It was just that he didn't like to be in power. Otherwise, there might be another person in the leader's position. Although he was now a level 6 dual ability user, his combat power was not inferior to a level 7 leader. This was not the point. The point was that the number of dual ability users was very small. There were so many survivors in Sea City, but there was only one dual ability user. But they heard that there were many dual ability users in the base of Huaxia City. After all, it was a super base, and its strength was at least 3 times stronger than that of Sea City. Seeing their shining eyes, Lin Xiao silently rolled her eyes. She didn't know what was wrong with Huang Shou's brain. He could see with his own eyes that she used 2 kinds of abilities, but he still asked such a stupid question. Before Lin Xiao replied, Xiedong had already written a sentence on the paper, and then directly tore it into a ball and threw it to Huang Shou's head. Ah, it hurts. Huang Shou wanted to dodge, but he didn't expect that he couldn't dodge the small paper ball, so he screamed. Then, he hurriedly caught the little ball of paper that was bouncing around. Opening it, he thought, "You are a fool. Is what you saw just now an illusion?" After reading it, Huang Shou said, "Oh," and then he reacted. He did see it just now. There was no mistake. It was a dual ability user. Lin Xiao looked at them and found that although they were all embarrassed and exhausted of energy, they didn't have any serious injuries. However, there were no major injuries on his body. They were all minor injuries that could be ignored. However, if she was not there, it was impossible for them to leave the zombie city with their current fighting power. But if she let them follow her, it meant that they had to go to the center where there were more zombies. Moreover, there were more advanced zombies, which was more dangerous for them. In this case, they could only temporarily stay in their own space. After she finished looking at the terrain, she would come out and send them back to the base. After thinking about it, Lin Xiao decisively took out the writing board. Then, he began to write. Seeing Lin Xiao suddenly took out the writing board to write, Lu Tianyi and others were stunned. They looked at Lin Xiao curiously and puzzledly, and then looked at each other. Why did she write again? Was she unable to speak? Just now the man had written in a small notebook, and now there was a big writing board. It seemed that it was really inconvenient for her to speak. When they were thinking about it, Lin Xiao finished writing. Then, he raised the board vertically and beckoned them over. Lu Tianyi and the others leaned over and saw a sentence written on it. "I don't have time to send you out of the city right now. You'd better come into my space and rest for 2 days before coming out." It meant that she had other things to do, so it was inconvenient for her to send them out of Zombie City. He had to wait for 2 days. Otherwise, with their current situation, even if they were given a bunch of weapons, they would not be able to survive. There was no guarantee that they would be able to escape from the zombie city unscathed. Chapter 196. Kong Qingming was the first to speak. In our current state, it's really impossible to rush through hundreds of thousands of zombies and get out of the upper city. He looked around. The place had been empty for a long time. He didn't know why there were no more zombies. It was reasonable to say that the 3 zombie leaders were no longer there. The other zombies should soon come back after smelling them. But they had been standing here for 2 or 3 minutes now, and there was still silence around them. It was very strange. Huang Shouying said, "Yes, we don't have weapons and abilities now. Our combat power has dropped by 80 to 70%. Lu Tianyi said at this time, "No, we can temporarily not enter the space. If we have guns, we can still deal with ordinary zombies. And our abilities will slowly recover, it just takes some time." He actually didn't want to stay in that space. After he saw her, he didn't intend to be protected by her, at least not in the space. That would make him too useless. Moreover, after entering the space, he wouldn't have too many opportunities to contact her. He still wanted to figure out what was going on. Was the Lu Tianyu in front of him really her? Kong Qingming glanced at him and didn't speak. The others looked at each other. Since their boss had already said so, they would just follow him outside. But, where are we going to find guns now? Lin Xiao glanced at them and suddenly squatted down and waved his hand on the ground. Puff, 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 puff. After a slight sound of metal falling to the ground, Everyone saw a row of guns appear where Lin Xiao waved his hand. Pistols, rifles, semi-machine guns, long-range snipers, and other guns appeared in front of them. After releasing the guns, Lin Xiao stood up and took 2 steps back. Then he pointed at the guns on the ground to Lu Tianyi. Lu Tianyi turned his head and looked at Kong Qingming, silent. Wow, is this for us? When the others saw the row of guns appear, their eyes went straight. With weapons, it meant that their combat power could increase by 50%. In this way, their lives would be protected by 50%. Lin Xiao just stood quietly and didn't make a sound. But in his heart, he complained. Since I took it out, it must be for you to use. Did I take it out to set up a stall? Lu Tianyi slowly walked over and stood in front of Lin Xiao, looking at her. He stared at her and finally couldn't help but ask, "Can you let me see your eyes?" His teammates, who were following behind him, could not wait to crouch on the ground, ready to grab their guns. When they suddenly heard Lu Tianyi's question, they all looked up at him strangely and then turned to look at Lin Xiao. Looking at Lin Xiao's chin from below, she found it even more beautiful. They looked at each other, and an ambiguous smile flashed across their faces. Then, they looked at Lu Tianyi in surprise. Could it be that their boss had fallen in love? But this was normal. There weren't many women in the base. Those who could go out of the base to fight zombies were even fewer. Now that they had encountered this powerful and mysterious woman, they naturally wanted to see what kind of eyes she had under her glasses. Actually, they also wanted to see it. The corners of Lin Xiao's mouth curled up slightly. He didn't expect this kid to remember Lu Tianyi so clearly. They had always hated each other. Could it be that the more you hate him, the more you care about him? If you want to see, sure, but don't regret it later. Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming both saw Lin Xiao's somewhat strange smile, and a bad feeling arose in their hearts. Suddenly, Lin Xiao took a step forward, stretched out her hands, and grabbed the 2 of them and disappeared directly into the space. Boss. Suddenly seeing their captain disappear again, the others were stunned. But soon they were relieved. Their boss wanted to see what the beauty looked like, but the beauty didn't seem to want them to see it. Bringing the boss into the space was probably to let the 2 of them see it. But why not let them see it? She was so beautiful that she was afraid of people looking at her. Or was there something wrong with her eyes? Didn't want too many people to see it? Huang Shou took a rifle, checked the magazine, and leaned over to Xie Dong and asked, "Is this woman your boss now? Isn't she very good looking? You're working for her now? But what about your teammates?" And Huang Shao. Xie Dong took out a small notebook and wrote, "They are dead. I don't have a squad now." "Ah, is that so?" This was really not good news. Huang Shou looked at him a little awkwardly. After entering the space, Lin Xiao let go of the 2 of them and stood opposite them. She didn't immediately take off her glasses to show them, but turned around and walked to the strawberry field. She picked a few strawberries, and then went to the bucket next to the stove to get some water with a ladle. Then she put the strawberries in and soaked them. After washing them, she directly handed them to the 2 of them. Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming watched her pick the strawberries, and then wash them with water. They didn't know what she wanted to do. These were mutated strawberries. The 2 of them didn't think that Lin Xiao would eat them, and they didn't think that Lin Xiao would actually wash them for them to eat. "This? What do you mean? You're not going to give them to us to eat, are you?" He looked at Lin Xiao with some doubt. The 2 of them didn't want to touch it. These were mutated strawberries. Lin Xiao suddenly reached out a hand to pull his hand out, and then forced the strawberries into his hand. Finally, she took one back, put it in her mouth, and took a bite. Then, she realized that she actually tasted a little sour. Unlike before, there was no taste at all. Huh. Lin Xiao's expression froze for a moment, then she chewed and swallowed it. She found that there was indeed a little sour taste in her mouth. Seeing her take a big bite of the strawberry in the blink of an eye, Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming were also dumbfounded. Only then did Lin Xiao look at them and say, "Eat. It's not poisonous." Suddenly hearing Lin Xiao speak so slowly, Lu Tianyi immediately looked at her with a puzzled expression. He asked, "What's wrong with your voice? Can't you even speak normally now?" Because he could still hear Lin Xiao's hoarse and rough voice, which was like heaven and earth compared to her original voice. It was as if her throat was broken. Lin Xiao took another bite of the strawberry and said, Eat or not eat and show you. Lu Tianyi watched her finish the whole strawberry and listened to her slow way of speaking. He said very unaccustomed, "You, Lu Tianyi," who had already confirmed that she was Lu Tianyu, now began to doubt himself again. Because Lu Tianyu had never spoken to him in such a peaceful manner, and he would never ask him to eat it. Was she trying to harm him? But she had eaten it herself. He didn't seem to be injured. Chapter 197. Seeing that Lu Tianyi's reaction was not as flexible as usual, Kong Qingming asked Lin Xiao, "Are you sure? This is a mutant strawberry. Are you trying to harm your brother and me? Anyway, you don't care about his life or death, do you?" He said it directly, explaining the relationship between Lu Tianyi and Lin Xiao's body. Lin Xiao just smiled faintly, then turned around and walked to the chair next to the stove to sit down. On the other hand, Lu Tianyi and Kong Qingming could clearly see the contempt in her smile. After sitting down, Lin Xiao raised her head slightly and looked at them. She said, "Dare?" Although it was only one word, the other two heard a sense of provocation from her tone. She was saying that they didn't have the guts. Lu Tianyi picked up a strawberry and looked at it closely. He found that the strawberry was so big and the color was not right. But when he smelled it, there was a strong strawberry fragrance. He didn't know that these strawberries had been planted in Lin Xiao's space for so long and had been drenched with lake water. The pungent smell had long disappeared, and there was no such light fragrance now. Lu Tianyi looked at Lin Xiao and said, "In fact, you have admitted it yourself. It doesn't matter if I eat it or not. But now you, completely different from before." After looking at Lin Xiao with a complicated look, he put the strawberry in front of him into his mouth. He quickly took a bite. "Hey, even if you want to die, don't die like this." Kong Qingming was shocked. He still couldn't believe that the strawberry was harmless. It had been mutated like this, so it was impossible that it didn't have the zombie virus. After seeing Lu Tianyi take a bite, he quickly reached out to pinch his chin. Lu Tianyi took a step back and avoided his outstretched hand. He blocked him with his other hand and chewed the strawberry in his mouth. In fact, he knew that if she wanted to harm them, she didn't have to come out to save them. What was the point of saving him and poisoning him? So he chose to believe her. In fact, he wanted to know what happened to her during this time. Why did her voice change and her throat seem to be broken? Lu Tianyi quickly swallowed the strawberry in his mouth and didn't have time to react to the taste. He said to Kong Qingming, "Don't worry, she doesn't have to do this." As he spoke, he turned to look at Lin Xiao and asked, "If I eat these mutated strawberries, can you tell me about your future?" Of course, he was referring to what would happen after she raped the leader of the base, but he was too embarrassed to say it out loud. Although everyone knew about it now, he didn't know why he was embarrassed to say it in front of this person. This feeling was so strange. The person in front of him was clearly someone he was familiar with, but she gave off the feeling of a stranger. Lin Xiao nodded and did not say anything. She realized that after this kid recognized who she was, his attitude didn't seem to reject her identity as much as she had imagined. Moreover, apart from shock, there was also surprise, worry, and other complex emotions in his reaction just now. However, there were no negative emotions such as hatred and disgust. He still wanted to look into her eyes, but he also wanted to know what was wrong with his throat. He also wanted to know what had happened after she had done that wicked thing. Weren't these people concerned about her? Moreover, Lin Xiao didn't expect that. Previously, he had sensed that strange feeling from afar, and it was coming from this kid. Why was this? Was it blood relations? But she had already become a zombie. What did it have to do with blood relations? After getting Lin Xiao's promise, Lu Tianyi continued to eat the strawberries. When he took another bite, he noticed something that he didn't notice before. It's also very sweet. Sweet and sour, tastes good. Lu Tianyi said with a surprised expression, and then handed one to Kong Qingming. He continued, "Try it. Anyway, even if you don't eat it, she won't let you out of the space." As he spoke, he looked at Lin Xiao. Kong Qingming. Lin Xiao looked at Kong Qingming, who was looking at her, and said, he said, "So it had nothing to do with her? She didn't say that." Kong Qingming turned his head and looked at Lu Tianyi. Did this guy want to trick him as well? They were really brothers. Lu Tianyi had already eaten the second one. In fact, they had been hungry for 2 days. Now that they had eaten the first bite, they didn't care about the rest. They didn't know if this woman knew that they were hungry now, so she gave them food. Well, I've eaten what you wanted me to eat. Can you take off your glasses? For some reason, he always cared about her sunglasses. In the past, Lu Tianyu's pair of bright eyes couldn't be covered with sunglasses. Lin Xiao said faintly, "Don't regret?" Lu Tianyi asked her puzzled, "What can I regret?" Lin Xiao nodded, and then lowered her head slightly. She took off the sunglasses with her hand, and then looked up. Lu Tianyi and Lin Xiao only saw a pair of dark eyes without the scara when she looked up, and the entire eyeball was filled with black. There was also a dark light flashing in her eyes. In this space that wasn't too bright, it seemed even more strange. The two almost subconsciously took a few steps back and stared at her with wide eyes. These were no longer human eyes. They were the eyes that they had seen not long ago, the eyes unique to high-level zombies. Your eyes. You. Lu Tianyi stared at Lin Xiao and opened his mouth in disbelief, but he couldn't finish a sentence. Lin Xiao suddenly stood up at this time, a pair of strange dark eyes staring at them, and her feet moved towards the two of them step by step. Seeing Lin Xiao coming towards them and being stared at by such a pair of strange eyes, even if Lu Tianyi and Lin Xiao were calm, they also followed her step by step back. When Lin Xiao took a step closer, they unconsciously took a step back. Lin Xiao took a few steps, then stopped. Looking at the two of them, she smiled faintly, and then raised her hand to put on her glasses. "Little thing, you still know fear. Just now you kept asking, why don't you know fear?" You clearly saw that she was different. Seeing Lin Xiao stop, Lu Tianyi and Lin Xiao still took a few steps back. They only stopped when they were 2 meters away from Lin Xiao. Lu Tianyi pointed at Lin Xiao's eyes and asked with a trembling voice, You, your eyes. What happened?" Kong Qingming also said to Lu Tianyi, "She's a zombie. She turned into a zombie?" Lu Tianyi turned his head with an expression of disbelief. Looking at Kong Qingming, he opened his mouth but couldn't make a sound. He never thought that under the sunglasses was a pair of eyes like this. Even if she was blind, it was better than this pair of black eyes. Chapter 198. Lin Xiao stood in the same place and silently looked at the two of them for more than 10 seconds before she turned to the chair next to her. She turned the chair with her hand and sat down facing the two of them. She knew that she needed to give the two of them some time to digest the current situation. After seeing Lin Xiao retreat to the chair and sit down, Lu Tianyi and the other person relaxed a little. Without the pressure from Lin Xiao, the two of them immediately became more active. In their eyes, Lu Tianyi was just like a normal person except for his eyes. They couldn't imagine the direction of a zombie at all. Have you ever seen a zombie that was clean and intact? Well, there were indeed, such as Qiu Lily. But these two people had never seen Qiu Lily. And even Qiu Lily had strong dark circles under her eyes. Of course, they didn't know that the Xiedong they had just seen was also a zombie. And who had seen a zombie that didn't eat people? She even saved them and could talk and communicate? Kong Qingming's brain worked faster. He stared at Lin Xiao and looked her up and down. As long as she put on her glasses, he couldn't see how she looked like a zombie at all. But if she wasn't a zombie, what was with her eyes? What are you? Was she a zombie? Or a human? She had the appearance of a human, but the eyes of a zombie. She had the eyes of a zombie, but the words and actions of a human. He had never heard of such a zombie. After Kong Qingming asked, he turned his head and looked at Lu Tianyi at the same time. They saw that he also wanted to ask these questions. After the two of them looked at each other, they immediately turned their heads to look at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao looked at the two of them and raised her hand to point at them. Then she turned to her head and gestured. She meant to let them think about it. Lu Tianyi stared at Lin Xiao closely, his eyes flashing. He also connected the thoughts in his mind. According to the previous news, Lu Tianyi was already dead. Then, if the one in front of him was a zombie, it could indeed be connected with the previous news. Moreover, if she had become a zombie now, then there was another ability in this space that he didn't know what it was. Maybe it was a mutation after becoming a zombie. This could also be established. However, why did she become a zombie after she died? How could he still retain his humanity and sanity? What's more, she was eating strawberries just now. What kind of zombie would eat something like that? If he said that she was not a zombie, then how could he explain her eyes? How do you explain this space? These questions still made Lu Tianyu's mind a little confused. Lin Xiao clearly sensed Lu Tianyu's conflicted mentality, and so did Kong Qingming next to him. She wondered how he would react if he knew that his soul had been replaced by someone else. She felt that it was necessary to make things clear to him. Otherwise, he would really think of her as his evil sister and cause unnecessary trouble for her in the future. That wouldn't be good. Seeing that the two of them had calmed down, Lin Xiao was about to take out the writing board and say that he was not Lu Tianyu. At this moment, a powerful aura suddenly came from the outside world. Lin Xiao's face darkened, and he stood up abruptly. Then, with a flash, he disappeared. The people outside sat on the stone steps to the side to rest. Huang Shoujing asked Xiedong all kinds of questions. Xiedong sat next to him, listening to his questions and writing a sentence for him to read. As he was writing, the person beside him suddenly flashed. Lin Xiao suddenly appeared beside him, but she was alone. But he did not see Lu Tianyi. When Lin Xiao came out, he happened to stand beside the two of them. Without another word, he grabbed the two of them and disappeared. Then, in the next second, it reappeared. Then, without saying a word, he grabbed the others and disappeared. His movements were very fast, and he seemed to be in a rush. What's wrong? The others saw Lin Xiao suddenly come out and disappear with his men. Everyone who had entered her space knew that Lin Xiao was bringing them into her space. But he didn't even say a word and moved so quickly. What was going on? Although Lin Xiao's reaction was fast, it was because she was in the space. His reaction to the outside world was a little slow. Therefore, it took her a few seconds to bring Xiedong, Huang Shou, and the others back into the cave. When there were only 4 or 5 people left, he knew in his heart that it was too late. Shit. This time, Lin Xiao leaped to the side of the 5 people. Suddenly, she kicked the one at the side. Ah, you kicked. Lu Jing, who was suddenly kicked, did not react. After flying to the side, he looked at Lin Xiao with a dumbfounded expression and was about to ask something. However, before he could finish his question, he suddenly heard a thunderous sound above his head. Boom! Following the sound of the thunder, a lightning bolt as thick as an arm fell from the sky. It struck the place where they were just sitting. After Lin Xiao sent Lu Jing flying, she turned around and used the force to kick the other man next to her. Then, she turned around to kick the others. However, in the time she kicked 2 people, the others had already moved away automatically. They were afraid that the next one would be kicked by Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao saw that the others moved away automatically, so she immediately moved to the side. Boom, boom, boom. The people who were kicked were also moved away by themselves. When they moved away, they heard the sound of thunder. Then, they saw bolts of lightning strike the place where they were just sitting. 4 to 5 bolts of lightning bombarded the area within 5 square meters of where they were just sitting. The people who were hurriedly thrown into the space by Lin Xiao looked at their 2 bosses blankly. They found that their boss was also looking at them blankly. What's wrong? Lu Tianyi sensed that Lin Xiao's actions were not good, so he immediately asked, I don't know. She suddenly threw us in. Huang Shou replied with a confused look. It turned out that he looked at Xiedong next to him. After all, Xiedong was now with that woman, so he might know what was going on. Xiedong closed his eyes and found that he could not sense anything in Lin Xiao's space. When he opened his eyes, he saw Huang Shou looking at him with a questioning look, so he shook his head at him. The others all had an expression as if they did not know what was going on. At this time, after Lin Xiao moved to the side, she suddenly turned around in midair and crossed her hands above her head to block. A huge figure had flashed in front of her without her noticing. It swung its palm at her head. Originally, it appeared behind Lin Xiao, but Lin Xiao reacted quickly. When it attacked, it suddenly twisted its body in midair and turned back. The claw that originally wanted to grab the back of her head hit Lin Xiao's crossed arms. Bang! Lin Xiao was sent flying by the claw. Then, she heavily smashed into the wall next to her, directly blasting a hole in the wall. Roar! The huge figure landed in the middle of the road as if nothing had happened and roared at Lin Xiao, who had smashed into the wall. Chapter 199. The others didn't know what was going on. Suddenly, they heard the sound of a heavy object hitting something. When he turned his head, he saw that the wall had been smashed with a fresh hole. Then they heard the roar of a zombie. When they looked again, they were all dumbfounded. A strange person about 2 meters tall stood there, facing the hole that had just been smashed out. As for this man who suddenly appeared, he was very tall and muscular. He was also very big in size. His muscles were like the Hulk, but the man in front of them wasn't green. It was blood red in color. His arms were as thick as an adult's calf, and his thighs were as thick as electric poles. His whole body was covered in blood. His head was normal, but all his hair had fallen off. His body was flashing with purple lightning. A pair of flashing purple eyes stared at the hole in the wall that Lin Xiao had smashed. It didn't look at the others, but the others who saw it didn't dare to move. What the hell was this thing? Lu Jing and the others were dumbfounded as they looked at the big guy. They had never seen such a huge body with lightning around its body. Moreover, its eyes were glowing with purple light. Only Lin Xiao, who was walking out of the hole, knew that this was a zombie king at the same level as Qiu Lili, and it was a rare lightning type. Lin Xiao slowly walked out of the hole. Her eyes under the sunglasses stared at the eyes of the zombie king. The others couldn't see her eyes under the sunglasses, but the zombie king could clearly see Lin Xiao's eyes. It looked at Lin Xiao walking out as if nothing had happened. Its attack didn't cause any effective damage to her. The lightning zombie king roared at Lin Xiao with dissatisfaction. Roar. Lin Xiao heard the warning in its voice, telling her to surrender or else it would kill her. She continued to walk forward while staring coldly at the zombie king's purple eyes. She was shrouded by the strong aura of the zombie king, but she didn't feel too much pressure. It was just a slight level suppression that could be ignored. Xiao Lin knew that the level 6 zombie king could no longer suppress her. After leveling up, she felt that Qiu Lili could no longer suppress her aura. It was no wonder that Qiu Lili could not sense her strength. Therefore, she didn't care about the zombie king's suppression. After walking out, Lin Xiao stood 5 to 6 meters away from the zombie king. She twisted her neck and loosened her shoulders. Then, he stood in front of the zombie king and raised his hands slightly. A puff of black smoke came out. When the zombie king saw that Lin Xiao wasn't willing to surrender, it immediately opened its mouth and let out a low growl, woo woo woo. When it saw Lin Xiao's black smoke, it didn't pay much attention to it. But soon, Lin Xiao's black smoke increased and spread out from his body. At this time, the zombie leader felt that something was wrong. It stared at Lin Xiao and narrowed its purple eyes. At this time, the others also reacted and quickly pointed the guns that Lin Xiao gave them at the zombie king. 222. A burst of gunshots immediately sounded. Lu Jing and the others had already hidden behind the obstacles. He was holding a gun and shooting at the naked zombie standing in the middle. However, when the bullets hit the zombie king, it didn't seem to be affected. It just turned its head and suddenly waved at Lu Jing and the others. Rumble dash, a few bolts of lightning accompanied by the sound of thunder flew towards them. Not good. The others immediately felt that something was wrong and shouted. Then, they all turned around and rolled away. Lin Xiao took advantage of the moment when the zombie king turned its head, and his figure suddenly flashed and disappeared. When the thunder zombie king turned its head, it couldn't see Lin Xiao's figure. It immediately looked around vigilantly. At this time, Lin Xiao turned invisible and jumped on a nearby tree. Then, she jumped on top of a lamppost closest to the zombie king. Then, she stepped on top of the lamppost and jumped over the zombie king's head. When the thunder zombie king was looking around strangely, a transparent figure suddenly flashed to a position 2 or 3 meters above its head and then suddenly appeared. Lin Xiao flipped his body in midair, and his claws, one in front and one behind, slashed down at the lightning zombie king below. Roar dashed, however, the zombie king's reaction wasn't slow. It suddenly turned sideways, flipped over, and rolled to the ground. Poo-poo dash at the place where it left. A few deep marks that looked like it was cut by a knife immediately appeared on the ground. The zombie king rolled on the ground and immediately stood up. It slightly arched its back and roared at the marks on the ground. Then, it suddenly leaped forward. Lin Xiao just landed on the ground and saw the zombie king's big head rushing towards her like a bull. At the same time, several bolts of lightning fell on top of her head and instantly struck her whole body. Seeing that the lightning snake was about to bite her, Lin Xiao rolled to the side and suddenly thought of Wu Chengyue. She thought about how she was kind enough to send her child to him, but in the end, she was attacked by him. Not good. Bang dash, after Lin Xiao dodged, the lightning fell on the ground and created several small holes. At this moment, the zombie king nimbly turned around and pounced towards her again. Lin Xiao quickly dodged and immediately became invisible again. At this time, her black smoke had unknowingly reached the zombie king's surroundings. After the zombie king pounced towards Lin Xiao, it suddenly found that its vision went black. It turned out that the direction where Lin Xiao landed just happened to be in the direction of the black smoke she released. She led the zombie king towards the direction of the black smoke. At the same time, she also controlled the black smoke to surround the zombie king. Therefore, when Lin Xiao disappeared, the zombie king didn't pounce and directly plunged into Lin Xiao's black smoke. As soon as the black smoke touched its body, it immediately corroded a layer of its skin and flesh. Roar dashed, the zombie king let out a loud roar. It was unknown whether it felt pain or not. Roar dash as it roared, it jumped out of the black smoke. But soon, it found that the black smoke seemed to stick to its body. When it rushed out, its whole body was still wrapped in a layer of black smoke. It was unknown whether the zombie king's flesh contained too much energy, but the speed at which the black smoke melted its flesh was a lot slower. But it was enough to make the zombie king, which was as strong as a bull, badly mutilated. Roar dashed, the lightning zombie king used its claws to pat its body, as if it wanted to pat the black smoke off its body. But after patting for a while, it found that it didn't work at all. Instead, its hands were stained with more black smoke. Soon, there were only bones with shreds of flesh left in its hand. Chapter 200. Seeing that this strange and powerful zombie seemed to be temporarily trapped, the others heaved a sigh of relief and began to evacuate to a safe place. What level is that zombie? Why is it so big? Could it be that it was this tall before it became a zombie? I don't think so. I can sense that the energy in its muscles is very strong. It should have become like this after mutation. Then what level is this guy? And I've never seen a zombie with purple eyes. I don't know, but I can tell. It's a lot stronger than the zombie leaders that chased us to God knows where. Do you think it's a level 6 zombie king? Hearing that it was the zombie king, the others felt their scalps tingle. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Let's leave before it recovers. Then, what about that big sister? What big sister? Didn't you see her disappear? Are you stupid? The other party had the space. If they really couldn't fight, they could just hide in the space. You have to take a look at us. If we continue to stay here, not only will it be dangerous, we might even drag them down. Let's go. As they spoke, they immediately made a prompt decision to turn around and retreat to a further distance. The lightning zombie king didn't have the mood to care about them anymore. It smacked a few times and realized that the black mist on its body didn't have any effect. The flesh on its body was quickly disappearing. The zombie king immediately released purple lightning all over its body, which started to cover its entire body like purple snakes. Then, he quickly separated the black mist from his flesh. When the black mist and the purple lightning collided, it quickly turned into a wisp of black smoke that rose up and dispersed. The zombie king quickly rushed out of the black mist. Strange humming sounds came from his mouth. Humph, humph, humph. After dispersing the black fog on its body, the zombie king looked even more terrifying. His body was originally covered in blood, but now it had become a bloody mess. Moreover, with every step he took, a large amount of viscous black blood dripped onto the ground. Then, it flowed all over the ground. However, this didn't seem to have much of an effect on the zombie king. After it walked out, it suddenly looked up to the sky and howled. Roar, Whoosh dash, two sounds could be heard as two figures suddenly rushed out and quickly stood in front of the zombie king. These were two high-level zombies. Lin Xiao recognized them as the two zombies that she had scared away before. So it was his subordinate. You called for help? After the two high-level zombies appeared, they lowered their heads and bowed to the thunder zombie. However, Lin Xiao could sense the intense fear coming from them, the fear towards this superior being. So scared? Why? Before Lin Xiao could figure it out, the zombie king suddenly took a step forward. Its claws glowed with a purple light as it stabbed towards the two high-level zombies. Poochie. The heads of the two high-level zombies were chopped off. Then, the zombie king quickly retracted its claws, which were still holding two corpse cores. The two high-level zombies instantly became corpses and then fell to the ground. Lin Xiao finally understood what these two high-level zombies were afraid of. They were afraid of being killed. However, they didn't dare to resist, so they could only obediently be killed to get their corpse cores. After the zombie king took out the corpse cores, it directly threw the two corpse cores that were stained with the brains of the two high-level zombies into its mouth and swallowed them. After swallowing the corpse cores, the zombie king exhaled and turned around. Suddenly, it raised its hand and pointed at Lin Xiao's black mist. Then, a rumble dash sound could be heard from the sky. Following that, bolts of lightning as thin as a pinky descended from the sky and struck the black fog. Pitter-patter boom 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 dash, bursts of lightning exploded on the ground. These numerous thin lightnings struck the black mist and directly dispersed it. Lin Xiao felt her head become stuffy, and then she lost control of the black mist's energy. She knew that the zombie king had used the lightning to disperse the energy in her black mist, and the black mist would quickly collapse. Sure enough, a level 6 zombie wasn't easy to deal with. Even the black mist couldn't melt it, so she used her claws to attack it. The zombie king's reaction was even faster than her, so this was basically useless. How should she fight it? Should she drag it into the spatial lake and let Little Man deal with it? She didn't know if Little Man could keep it under control. Moreover, this body of blood and flesh, if she were to throw it into the lake, who knew how dirty the water would become? Then should she drink it or not? While Lin Xiao was thinking about how to deal with the zombie king, the zombie king was looking for her everywhere. This zombie king actually dared to steal the food it had ordered, scaring away the low-level zombies that brought it food. Its prey had also run away. It had been starving for many days and was just waiting for the live food that was delivered this time to be able to fill its stomach. It didn't expect that it would be intercepted by another zombie king when it was almost at its doorstep. Moreover, this zombie king's level wasn't even as high as it was. If it was the same level, it wouldn't be so angry. A low-level zombie king dared to offend it. It was simply provoking it. It was determined to tear this one of its kind apart and dig out its corpse core. While Lin Xiao and the zombie king were confronting each other, several military vehicles came from the other side dozens of kilometers away. 3 trucks and 2 off-road vehicles were heading towards Lin Xiao's side. At this time, Wu Yueling was curled up in Wu Chengyue's arms, tightly holding the grass dragonfly in her hand, but she closed her eyes and fell asleep like a kitten. Wu Chengyue was holding his daughter while looking out the window. Xiao Yunlong was studying the map next to him. He asked without raising his head, "Are you sure this Thunder King is in the upper city? There are so many zombies here. There should be dozens of level 5 zombie leaders." Haiqing Base knew that the density of zombies in the downtown area of Hangzhou was very high, so basically, a single team would not enter here. Because there were dozens of level 5 zombie leaders here, even if there was a level 6 zombie king, it was also very normal. But no one would provoke the zombie king if there was nothing to do. Killing it was a problem. If they couldn't kill it, it might attract the revenge of the zombie tide. Because the zombie king's intelligence was not low, and it was also very vengeful. Wu Qingyue nodded. It's not that there are many level 5 zombies. Only then can there be a zombie king. Xiao Yunlong looked up at him, and then looked at little Lingling in his arms. He said, "How sure are you? It's too risky. If you don't kill it, you know the consequences." Wu Chengyue nodded with a faint smile and said, "I know, so I will think of a way to kill it, but I need you to look after Lingling for me." Of course, he knew that if he didn't kill the zombie king, He would not only be chased for thousands of miles, he might also attract a zombie tide. That would be big trouble. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.